Chapter 1037. Apprenticeship. After receiving Wu Di's endless thanks, Li Wanlong finally got his wish and left. Yi Zichen had sent Wu Di to thank him on purpose. That way, he'd make Li Wanlong feel even worse. When he saw the fleeing Li family members, Yi Zichen snorted calmly. See that? You can't spoil people like that. The more you back down, the more they'll take advantage of you. Sometimes you just have to be a bit more domineering to make them fear you. His words were obviously directed at Wu Di. Wu Di nodded solemnly and bowed. This junior will remember. Earlier, with Li Wanlong present, Wu Di knew that Yi Zichen was only addressing him as master and disciple so he could borrow his influence. Now that Li Wanlong and his men had left, there was naturally no need to call them master and disciple anymore. When Yi Zichen heard Wu Di refer to himself as junior, he couldn't help but wonder inwardly. Wu Di was perfect in every way, except that he was too timid. Or perhaps it was better to say that he didn't know when to advance or retreat. His personality wasn't bad, but it's no problem. It's nothing. Yi Zichen nodded calmly, then disappeared. Although he really did want to take Wu Di as his disciple, since the kid couldn't understand his intentions, there was no need to rush to him. Junior. When Yi Zichen left, Zheng Yunan turned to Wu Di in surprise. Isn't Senior Yi your master? Why don't you address him as master and disciple? How could Wu Di not want a master like Yi Zichen? It was just that this was just his wishful thinking. Senior Yi isn't actually my master. He's just standing up for me and using the master-disciple relationship as leverage. When she heard this explanation, Zheng Yunan stared blankly for a moment, then slapped Wu Di on the shoulder. Are you stupid? Do you really think a master-disciple relationship is something you can borrow just because you say so? If Senior Yi says you're his disciple, that means he really does intend to take you on as his disciple. Besides, if he really wants to borrow your influence, you'll be able to do so no matter what. Even if he shows you the slightest bit of affection, Li Wanlong and the others won't dare offend you. Zheng Yunan's explanation caused Wu Di's eyes to light up. However, when he recalled Yi Zichen's cold expression as he left, his hopes were dashed once more. How is that possible? What kind of existence is Senior Yi? There must be many geniuses who want to take Senior Yi as their master. My aptitude is dull, so how could Senior Yi take a fancy to me? Moreover, if Senior Yi really wanted to take me as a disciple, then I didn't see any reaction from him when I addressed myself as a junior just now. When she heard Wu Di's remorseful tone, Zheng Yunan raised her hand and smacked the back of his head. Are you stupid? Tell me, are you stupid? You also know that Senior Yi is high and mighty, and that there are many geniuses who want to worship Senior Yi as their master? Since that's the case, do you still think that Senior Yi will be so sorrowful just because you call him junior? Do you think that he will cry and beg to take you in as his disciple? Wu Di, I don't think you're that brainless. Then what do you think we should do? Wu Di didn't know what to do. He naturally wanted to take Yi Zichen as his master, but he was worried he'd be too rash. In my opinion, you should go back and tell Senior Yi that you want to be his disciple. I'm sure Senior Yi will accept you as his disciple. Are you sure? I'm sure. Zheng Yunan lifted her delicate face, her cheeks flushing red. If Senior Yi refuses, I'll devote myself to him. You'll believe me that way, right? Yunan, it's impossible between us. Zheng Yunan's words were already blatant, but Wu Di's reply caused her body to stiffen. After a while, she glanced at Wu Di disdainfully. Hey, don't overthink things. I'm just making an impossible analogy. Do you really think I'd marry you? My ideal Prince Charming is a peerless hero. At the very least, he has to be someone on Senior Yi's level. You'd best prepare for the clan's grand competition. When the time comes, don't place outside the top 100. That won't just be a disgrace to you, it'll be a disgrace to Senior Yi as well. He waved at Wu Di, then heard Jing Yunan say, "Hurry up and go back. Hurry up and go back. Believe me, Senior Yi will definitely accept you as a disciple. I still have to go notify the other clans about the competition, so I can't stay here any longer." "Alright, I've troubled you." Even now, Wu Di maintained a suitable distance between them. He bade Jing Yunan farewell, as if he were a scholar sending her off. Jing Yunan's nose twitched, but she stubbornly turned her head away. Without another word, she gradually disappeared from Wu Di's line of sight. After a long while, Wu Di, who was still bowing, looked up. Jing Yunan's words echoed through his mind. His eyes brimmed with bitterness. "You're the proud daughter of heaven, the Grand Retainer's most beloved granddaughter. I'm the son of a maidservant. Every step I take within the clan is like treading on thin ice. You and I don't belong to the same world. Now, with great difficulty, I've reached a turning point in my life. If I really can be like you one day, then I—" Suddenly, Wu Di shook his head and slapped himself twice in the face. He smiled wryly. "I'll be fine, I'll be fine." "Wu Di, oh Wu Di, what on earth are you dreaming about?" By the time Wu Di returned to his residence, it was already late in the evening. Although Jing Yunan had analyzed his situation thoroughly and cheered him on over and over again, when he thought about how he was about to take this life-changing step, Wu Di still felt uneasy. He wandered around town for an entire afternoon. It was as if word had spread throughout Black Ox Town that he was some supreme expert's disciple. He discovered that the town was much friendlier to him than before. This change made him even more terrified and uneasy. All of this was because of Senior Yi. Could such a powerful senior really take a liking to him? Yi Zichen wandered aimlessly until dusk. When he arrived at the tavern he'd bought alcohol from, he clenched his fists, took out all of his savings, and bought a jug of the immortal brew that Yi Zichen had praised. He pushed open the door and entered. To his surprise, Yi Zichen was standing in the courtyard. "You're back." Yi Zichen's tone was ordinary, but it made Wu Di's heart beat even faster. He gulped, walked up to Yi Zichen, and handed him the jug of immortal brew. "Senior, you actually bought another jug?" When he saw the immortal brew, Yi Zichen's eyes lit up. In the past, he hadn't been much of a drinker, but in his 10th life, the weight of his past had made him crave alcohol as much as his life. He tilted his head back and drained the jug of immortal brew in one gulp, then closed his eyes. When he opened them, he saw that Wu Di was already kneeling in front of him. "What are you doing? If you're thanking me, there's no need to thank me. I already told you it was nothing." Chapter 1038. Take in a disciple. Yi Zichen looked at Wu Di, who knelt in front of him. Wu Di's expression was both nervous and filled with longing. In truth, Yi Zichen had his own reasons for wanting to take Wu Di as his apprentice. Perhaps he'd used him a little. However, when he returned to Wu Di's residence and thought things over, he decided that using him to take him in as a disciple wasn't very fair to Wu Di's pure and innocent heart. Accepting a disciple represented responsibility. What's more, this was Yi Zichen's first disciple. Yi Zichen's expression was somewhat grave. Under his gaze, Wu Di knew that this senior was deep in thought. Wu Di grew nervous, and his expression grew solemn. "Have you thought it through?" After a while, Yi Zichen looked at Wu Di, who knelt on the ground. His eyes blazed like torches, as if they could pierce through his very soul. "I might not be able to teach you too much. All I can do is give you some pointers when you hit a bottleneck. As for your future path, you'll still have to walk it on your own. I can't stay in Black Ox Town or the Mortal Great District forever. I can't protect you for the rest of your life. I don't want you to become my disciple on a whim. Are you sure you're ready?" Since he was accepting a disciple, Yi Zichen naturally had to examine him carefully. Although he had never experienced the betrayal of his disciples, he had seen many cases of disciples betraying their masters when he was in the modern realm. Although Wu Di was a kind-hearted youth, it couldn't be denied that he had far too many stories hidden in his heart. Yi Zichen was worried that Wu Di would stop at nothing for the sake of revenge. No matter what, he couldn't accept a disciple like that. He didn't want to become the tragic main character of this story. His voice was infused with the strange power of the Tao of heaven and earth. It pierced straight through Wu Di's mind and interrogated his innermost soul. I took you in as my disciple because of your character, but no matter what, I don't know much about you. Since I want to take you in as my disciple, I will naturally teach you wholeheartedly, whether it is in terms of how to conduct yourself or how to overcome the shackles of your cultivation. But I don't want to take in a scum who is blinded by hatred and will do anything for revenge. Do you know what I mean? Rumble. As soon as Yi Zichen spoke, a fierce wind howled and thunder boomed. The sky darkened. It was as if only Yi Zichen and Wu Di were left. As he knelt on the ground, Wu Di's heart raced. He was astonished by Yi Zichen's heaven-defying methods, but in the blink of an eye, he regained his composure, looked up at Yi Zichen, and enunciated each word carefully. A teacher for a day, a father for life. I, Wu Di, have never betrayed anyone in my life, and I definitely won't do so in the future. Wu Di's words came from the bottom of his heart. He knew full well that Yi Zichen was testing him, which meant he really was considering whether or not to accept him as his disciple. The deeper Ye's probing, the more of him. Wu Di said, I di of, he. Zichen and di of di wu of his of. Adichen, of and of there, and of no of ti of the, there. Dien. A satisfied smile appeared in Yi Zichen's eyes. As Wu Di answered, he'd been peering into his soul. Wu Di was certain that Wu Di's words were the answer from the depths of his heart. All right. From this day forth, you are my first disciple. Bang. Wu Di kowtowed even harder. His entire body trembled as he looked up at the sky and roared. Wu Di kowtows in salute, master. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. During that time, aside from learning about the God Realm's history and general knowledge, Yi Zichen gave Wu Di pointers on cultivation. It had to be said that Wu Di was a hidden gem of the Wu family. He was so talented and intelligent that even Yi Zichen couldn't help but call him a demon. In just a few short days, thanks to Yi Zichen's guidance, Wu Di had already reached the mid-stage, entering immortality stage. Remember, a few days ago, when he'd first met Wu Di, he'd only been a little fellow with a spiritual body. With such monstrous cultivation speed, the Wu family's failure to raise him with all their resources was absolutely a loss. Of course, that didn't rule out the possibility that someone had instigated this from the shadows to suppress Wu Di's talent. On the 3rd day after accepting Wu Di as his disciple, Li Wanlong wasted no time. As soon as the sky brightened, he sent someone to deliver the resources he'd promised. Surprisingly, there were a dozen peak entering immortality experts among the escort. There was even a human immortal leading them. He had no other choice. The amount of resources he'd promised was simply too vast. Furthermore, he'd paid for them out of his own pocket. If anything went wrong, he'd have to go back and buy them all. That would cost him his life. That was especially true of the Earth-grade precious armor Yi Zichen had specifically asked for. He'd spent 1,000,000 spirit coins and a favor to trade for it from a master artifact refiner. When he thought of this, his heart bled, but when he considered Yi Zichen's Earth Immortal or even Sky Immortal strength, he dared not voice his anger. All he could do was grimace and summon his trusted subordinates, whom he'd nurtured for a long time, and repeatedly warn them to deliver the spatial ring to Yi Zichen without any mishaps. After accepting the spatial ring, Yi Zichen naturally had to express his gratitude. No matter how you looked at it, Li Wanlong had delivered such a huge gift. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was generous. He told his protectors to convey his gratitude, then returned to his courtyard and tossed the ring to Wu Di. These resources had been requested for Wu Di. Hearing about them from Li Wanlong was one thing, but seeing them in front of him with his own eyes was a completely different thing. As his heart shook, Wu Di nodded solemnly and put the ring away. There was nothing he could do to repay Yi Zichen for treating him so well. All he could do was use his efforts and strength to make Yi Zichen feel gratified. Time flowed by. In the blink of an eye, Yi Zichen had been in Black Ox Town for half a month. During this time, he'd gone out of his way to experience the city's rejection. He couldn't deny that this city was boundlessly mysterious. When the time on his temporary residence permit reached 0, he felt as if the laws of the city were rejecting him. He had no choice but to leave. This sort of understanding of the laws of heaven and earth was far beyond Yi Zichen's. Since the laws of heaven and earth were too profound, Yi Zichen didn't try to understand them. He simply stayed in Black Ox Town, drank immortal brew, and taught his disciples. Chapter 1039. Scarface wanted revenge. Outside Black Ox Town, Scarface gnashed his teeth as he stared at the city that had existed for who knew how long. The events of that day haunted him like a nightmare. Whenever he thought about how he, a mighty squad leader of the Axe Gang, had been robbed so badly that he didn't even have his pants left. In particular, when he entered Flame City, the people looked at him strangely. He felt like he had been insulted and his dignity had been trampled on. For an entire week, he'd holed up in his hotel, not daring to show his face. He was terrified that he'd become the butt of the jokes of the people in the city. However, his silence didn't mean he'd let it all go. His silence was like dry firewood, stoking the flames of fury in his chest even higher. As a result, a few nights ago, he'd groped his way to the Axe Gang's headquarters in Raging Flame City. Given his status, he naturally couldn't alert the leader, but he could find a few colleagues. "Scar, you said the person who robbed you lives here?" asked a thin man. His skin was so dark that he looked like he'd just crawled out of a pile of coal. However, he was wearing a white robe with this kind of skin color, which made him look very out of place. This was the Axe Gang's first squad leader, Zhao Yi. He was at the peak of entering immortality. Scarface had paid a hefty price to invite this leader over. He'd even said that Wu Di had an Earth-grade treasure worth 1,000,000 gold coins. "It's here. There's no mistaking it." Scarface practically gnashed his teeth as he spoke. That day had been far too humiliating. Getting robbed was one thing, but even his pants had been stolen. Although he'd holed up in Raging Flame City for a period of time, his informants in Black Ox Town were sure that Wu Di and the person who'd robbed him were still in town. "The person who robbed me is currently living in Wu Di's home." When he heard this, the swarthy man furrowed his brows and turned to Scarface. "Wu Di? Is he a member of Raging Flame City's Wu family?" "Scar, you never told me that the Wu family was here." "No matter what, the Wu family is still a large family in Raging Flame City. They're a tyrant in the Mortal Great District. Now that you're asking me to cause trouble for the Wu family's heir, aren't you just pushing me into a pit of fire?" "Captain Zhao, there's no need to worry. Although Wu Di is a descendant of the Wu clan, his position within the clan is quite awkward. He's already on the verge of being expelled from the clan. Our Axe Gang doesn't need to worry about such an identity. No matter how powerful the Wu family is, would they dare to provoke our Axe Gang? Moreover, the one we're fighting over isn't this kid, but the person beside him." "That's true, but Wu Di is still a member of the Wu clan. That's undeniable." It was true that the Wu family did not dare to provoke the Axe Gang, but the Axe Gang did not want to become enemies with the Wu family. If the Wu clan really came looking for trouble, the branch leader would definitely use us to vent the Wu clan's anger. "Dao Ba, it wasn't easy for me to get to this point. I can't let anything happen to me." As he spoke, Zhao Yi sighed and prepared to leave. When he saw this, Scarface panicked. He'd come to Black Ox Town to cause trouble for Yi Zichen, and Zhao Yi was his greatest source of confidence. If he let Yi Zichen leave, wouldn't he have come for nothing? He couldn't drag this out any longer. He'd already had countless nightmares. He was truly worried that if he delayed any longer, he'd go crazy. Scarface gnashed his teeth, ran up to Zhao Yi, and blocked his path. I only want what belongs to me. As for the Earth-grade treasures, they'll all belong to you, Captain Zhao. Earlier, they'd agreed to split the profits 50-50. Now that he'd given all the treasures to Zhao Yi, nearly 500,000 spirit coins had flown right before his eyes. This was already a huge transaction, but Zhao Yi still shook his head. Throwing away my future for 500,000 spirit coins isn't worth it. I'll pay another 300,000 spirit coins. Scarface raised 3 fingers. 300,000 spirit coins was practically half his life's savings. Although his heart ached, the image of Yi Zichen robbing him had become a heart demon. Only if he snatched it back would he be able to get rid of it. For the sake of future development, 300,000 spirit coins was worth it. However, he never would have guessed that Zhao Ye's appetite would be so enormous. He'd already given up so much, yet this guy still looked so unwilling. 400,000. Zhao Ye's eyes flashed with hesitation. It was clear that his expression was a bit lacking. 500,000. This time, Scarface practically roared. When he said this number, his neck and face flushed red. After all, he'd only been robbed of roughly 500,000 spirit coins. For him to say this number meant that he wouldn't gain anything from this trip. In order to avenge his robbery, he'd already paid a hefty price. When he heard this number, Zhao Yi smiled in satisfaction. This trip to Black Ox Town had netted him 1.5 million spirit coins. He wouldn't have to worry about food, drink, and cultivation for the next few years. However, his expression was still solemn, and he put on a helpless expression. All right, since you've put it that way, Scarface, I'll have no choice but to take the risk myself. With that, Zhao Yi shook his head and sighed. He clasped his hands behind his back and headed back to Black Ox Town. His subordinates followed closely behind, their eyes brimming with joy. They'd heard that number too. Their captain ate the meat while they drank the soup. When the time came, their captain wouldn't be stingy. No matter what, he'd give each of them tens of thousands of spirit coins. Scarface inwardly cursed Zhao Yi for being a wily old fox. He refused to believe that Zhao Yi hadn't done his research before coming. Since he'd come, it meant that he didn't care about Wudi's status at all. He'd said all that just now because he wanted to make some extra profit. Scarface remembered all of this. It wasn't that he didn't want to pay back, but that the time hadn't come yet. Let's go. He waved at his subordinates, then followed Zhao Yi and the others into Black Ox Town. Dozens of people traversed the streets of Black Ox Town in a grandiose procession. When they saw how aggressive they were, especially the hatchets strapped to their chests, the townsfolk didn't dare block their way. They opened up the main street, wondering just who had offended the Axe Gang. Captain Zhao, we're here. Scarface smiled apologetically when they arrived in front of Wudi's residence. When he saw Zhao Yi nod, he took a few steps forward and roared, "Everyone inside, come out! The people inside, come out! Your Grandpa Scar is here for you." His angry roar immediately attracted the attention of the townsfolk. When they saw Scarface standing in front of his residence, strange expressions appeared on their faces. In the past few days, Black Ox Town had gained a new resident they couldn't afford to offend. That resident was none other than Wu Di. This was especially true of those who'd witnessed Yi Zichen teach Li Wanlong a lesson. When they saw Scarface and the others hooting outside his residence, strange expressions appeared on their faces. Chapter 1040. Black Ox Town's new law. The news that the Axe Gang had come to find trouble with Senior Yi spread like wildfire, and it immediately attracted countless onlookers. Scarface could sense the enthusiasm of the people of Black Ox Town. As he watched more and more spectators gather, his smile grew even more sinister. From his point of view, the more people there were, the better. When that happened, he would also steal Yi Zichen's pants and make him lose face in front of everyone. Thinking of this, Scarface shouted even louder. "The people inside, come out. Your Grandpa Knife Scar is here for you. Don't hide in there pretending to be a grandson. If you're a man, come out and see me." The Divine Mountain had a rule that all residences in any district were considered private property. No one was allowed to force their way in. Those who broke the law would be severely punished by the Divine Mountain. Therefore, even though Scarface's group was very aggressive, they could only stand outside the door and shout. Meanwhile, Yi Zichen was leisurely drinking immortal brew in his courtyard. Thanks to Li Wanlong's support, Wu Di no longer had to worry about money. He didn't have to plant spirit herbs all over the courtyard in exchange for money. In order to allow Yi Zichen to live more comfortably, he'd specially modified the courtyard. He'd made a stone table in the middle of the courtyard for Yi Zichen to drink or answer his questions. It had to be said that even though the immortal wine here was very tasty and the spiritual fruits inside were beneficial to raising one's cultivation, it was still not enough. However, he felt that this immortal brew was not as spicy as the Erguotu and Lao Baigon. "Whoever is inside, come out now." At that moment Yi Zichen, who was in the courtyard, heard the commotion outside. Yi Zichen frowned, then waved his hand to set up a soundproof barrier around the room. Not long ago, Yi Zichen's words had given Wu Di some enlightenment, and he was currently in seclusion. Perhaps he'd reached the peak of mid-stage, entering immortality, by the time he left seclusion. Yi Zichen couldn't let his shouts interrupt Wu Di's enlightenment. After spending a few days in Black Ox Town, Yi Zichen was keenly aware that he was now an absolute tyrant. Even Li Wanlong's subordinates had to treat him and Wu Di with great respect. As for the commoners in the city, that was even less worth mentioning. Just as he was wondering which idiot dared to come to his front door and curse, he heard, "Your Grandpa Scarface is here for you." Scarface? The name sounded familiar. Suddenly, Yi Zichen recalled the Axe gang members he'd run into in the Forbidden Wastelands. Their leader seemed to be the one with the scar on his face. If he recalled correctly, he'd robbed them of even their pants. How could Yi Zichen take such a minor character to heart? If it weren't for the old man shouting at him, Yi Zichen would have completely forgotten about him. He touched the ring on his finger. Coincidentally, he had no money to buy alcohol recently, so he came over again. What a nice guy. Yi Zichen stretched lazily, then stood up from the stone chair, walked to the door and pushed it open. "What are you arguing about?" Yi Zichen's calm rebuke caused Scarface, who'd been just about to make a fuss, to gulp. Although Yi Zichen had looked like an old beggar when he'd robbed him, based on his tone of voice and figure, he was certain that this handsome youth was the criminal who'd robbed him. Scarface retreated to Zhao Yi, then pointed at Yi Zichen. "Captain Zhao, that's him." When he'd first arrived, Scarface was brimming with heroic spirit, but when he saw Yi Zichen's cold expression, his heart raced, and his calves trembled uncontrollably. "You don't want to use that finger of yours anymore, do you?" Yi Zichen's expression frosted over, and he glared at Scarface. Scarface instantly felt as if he'd fallen into an icy cavern. He shrank his neck and stood behind Zhao Yi, shivering. He repeatedly said, "That's him," but didn't dare point at Yi Zichen. When Yi Zichen emerged from the courtyard, Zhao Yi naturally caught sight of him as well. When he saw him, Zhao Yi felt an overwhelming sense of heroism wash over him. When he saw Yi Zichen's face, he was even more astonished. The way he saw it, anyone who could teach Scarface a lesson had to be around their age, but judging by his appearance, he looked like he was in his 20s. Generally speaking, after entering immortality, one's appearance wouldn't change. Didn't that mean this youth had entered immortality at the age of 20? Then now, Zhao Yi couldn't make up his mind, but when he considered that this was the mortal great district, and a tiny little Black Ox town at that, his peak entering immortality strength was more than enough. "Let me tell you, you've caused a huge disaster. I really hate it when people disturb me while I'm drinking, but not only did you disturb me, you did it so loudly. How do you intend to make it up to me? Yi Zichen cocked his head to the side, his expression unfriendly, especially when he looked directly at Scarface. When he sensed Yi Zichen's gaze, Scarface instinctively wanted to retreat, but when he remembered that Captain Zhao was by his side, he puffed up his chest and snorted. Grandson, don't think too highly of yourself. Do you see that? This is our Axe Gang's chief captain, Captain Zhao Yi. What about it? Yi Zichen's expression was as calm as ever. Scarface felt powerless against Yi Zichen's indifferent tone. He gnashed his teeth, his gaze fierce, and snorted. What do you think? I'm here for revenge. How are you going to get revenge? Yi Zichen's expression was as calm as ever, as if he didn't care about Zhao Yi and the others at all. He chuckled. Don't tell me you want to fight me here? I'm afraid that'll be quite unbearable. Administrator Li Wanlong and a few of the stewards of Black Ox Town issued an order a few days ago forbidding all private fights within Black Ox Town. If you want to fight me, then you'll have to fight the guards of Black Ox Town first. In truth, Li Wanlong was the one who'd issued the order. He was truly worried that Yi Zichen would harm them in Black Ox Town, which was why he'd contacted the town's stewards. On the surface, it looked like he was doing this for the sake of the town's residents, but in reality, he was trying to restrict Yi Zichen. What are you doing up ahead? Black Ox Town forbids private fight. Do you want to test the law? Coincidentally, Black Ox Town soldiers were patrolling the area. In truth, Li Wanlong had instructed them to set up Yi Zichen's residence as their primary patrol point to monitor his movements. The soldiers' angry roars caused Scarface and Zhao Ye's expressions to shift. Yi Zichen, however, shrugged and laughed. You should be grateful for Black Ox Town's decree. Without it, you might already be lying on the ground. And you, I'm afraid you've lost your pants. Being robbed of his pants was a lifelong humiliation for Scarface. When he heard Yi Zichen mention his scar again, his entire face flushed red. He roared angrily, What are you talking about? Chapter 1041. The Axe Gang's members were all good people. Scarface's entire aura surged. His eyes widened and his face reddened with rage, making the scars on his face seem even more sinister. He breathed heavily, then shifted to the side to make way for Yi Zichen. He pointed at the gates of Black Ox Town. The onlookers were stunned by Scarface's courage. Ever since the incident with Li Wanlong, it had been a long time since anyone had dared speak to Yi Zichen like this. The soldiers glanced at each other. Although they knew this was a member of the Axe Gang, they dared provoke a star of calamity like Yi Zichen. They could only blame themselves. Do you dare? When Yi Zichen didn't respond, Scarface assumed he was afraid. He puffed out his chest and shouted angrily. You're really looking to die. The townsfolk sneered inwardly. Yi Zichen was so strong that even Li Wanlong, a human immortal, didn't dare let out a fart when he beat him. Scarface had only just entered immortality, yet he dared yell at Yi Zichen like this? Senior Yi, go with him and teach them a lesson. That's right, Senior Yi, go outside and teach them a lesson. The onlookers had already started shouting. When one person took the lead, countless others followed. The people of Black Ox Town didn't have a good impression of the Axe Gang. Of those who'd been in the 13th district long enough, who dared say they hadn't been robbed by the Axe Gang. As for those who'd been here for a bit longer, they'd heard that the Axe Gang claimed to be righteous, but they were actually bandit. Shut up! Scarface frowned and shouted angrily. The Axe Gang's subordinates glared coldly at the townsfolk. However, their gazes didn't scare the townsfolk away. Instead, wave after wave of boos rose. In contrast, Zhao Yi was much calmer than Scarface and the others. In response to the townsfolk's boos, he merely smiled calmly, then used this as an excuse to look at Yi Zichen. I can see that Brother Yi is quite famous in Black Ox Town. Since the townsfolk have said so, why don't you follow us out of town? Is that okay? Yi Zichen scratched his head in apparent distress. He just robbed Scarface a few days ago. To tell the truth, he really couldn't bear to do it again. Especially this time, Scarface didn't even come to deliver it himself. Instead, he brought someone who seemed to be richer than him. The people of the Axe Gang were really good people. Are you scared? When he saw Yi Zichen scratch his head, Scarface thought he was afraid and mocked him. Zhao Yi smiled faintly as he pointed at the townspeople who were watching. Everyone is waiting for Brother Yi to leave the city with us. If Brother Yi doesn't go out, I'm afraid you'll disappoint them. Yi Zichen's expression was still as vexed as ever. He frowned at the Axe Gang members, who couldn't wait to give him their money. If I go out just because you ask me to, wouldn't that make me lose face? Then what do you want? Scarface took a step forward. In truth, he was truly worried that Yi Zichen would hole up in Black Ox Town forever. If that were really the case, he really wouldn't be able to do anything to him. Now that Yi Zichen's tone had clearly softened, he was worried that a long delay would bring trouble. He gritted his teeth, took out a spatial pouch, and tossed it over. 10,000 spirit coins. So long as you leave the city, it's yours. Yi Zichen caught the pouch and probed it with his immortal awareness. When he discovered that there really were 10,000 spirit coins inside, he was so moved he couldn't put it into words. The people of the Axe Gang were too nice. They were so eager to give him money. Where else could he find such good people? However, to his surprise, just as he was sighing over how good the Axe Gang was, Zhao Yi tossed him a pouch of money. I have 10,000 spirit coins here too. 20,000 spirit coins. Yi Zichen clutched the pouch in a daze. He didn't know what to say. Yi Zichen resisted the urge to cry, then hesitated no longer. He put the pouch of money in his pocket, put his hands behind his back, and walked past Scarface and the others. It was hard to refuse such kindness. They'd already gone this far. If Yi Zichen didn't appreciate it, wouldn't that make them lose face? Yi Zichen sighed helplessly. Let's go. The Li Manor. These past few days, Li Wanlong hadn't been all that comfortable. With Yi Zichen, that malignant star, by Wu Di's side, he was truly worried that Wu Di would complain to Yi Zichen and that malignant star would come knocking on his door. He'd sent a message to his sister, but she'd yet to respond. As a result, he'd been on edge for the past few days. Administrator Li. A Li family servant hurried over. Li Wanlong was already anxious, but when he saw that the servant hadn't even announced his arrival, his expression darkened and he berated him. Didn't you know to report before entering? The servant hadn't expected Li Wanlong to be so angry. He stood there in a daze, not knowing what to do. Li Wanlong snorted coldly at him. What's wrong? Administrator Li, the Axe Gang has come to Black Ox Town, said the servant, not daring to delay any longer. So what if they're here? Black Ox Town isn't the Wu family's private territory. What's so surprising about the Axe Gang coming? Li Wanlong's expression darkened even further when he heard the servant report such a trivial matter to him. Under his gaze, the servant's legs began to tremble. In order to save his own life, he had to speak faster. They didn't just come to Black Ox Town to rest. They came looking for that malignant star in the northern part of the city. It seems the Axe Gang has a grudge against that malignant star. They've been cursing and swearing for quite a while. However, Black Ox Town strictly forbids private fight. Not long ago, they left the city. They've probably left by now. Didn't you say that if I had any information on that malignant star, I should tell you right away? That's why this lowly one deserves to die. Please spare my life, Administrator Li. The servant couldn't bear the pressure of Li Wanlong's gaze. He knelt on the ground and kowtowed repeatedly. The Axe Gang came looking for him? What kind of Axe Gang members are they? I heard it's Scarface, a squad leader, and Zhao Yi, the Axe Gang's main squad leader in Raging Flame City. They've brought around 30 subordinates with them. So it's the two of them. Li Wanlong didn't pay any more attention to the servants kneeling on the ground, but his mind was spinning. The Axe Gang had come looking for Yi Zichen? That was good news. As someone born and raised in the 13th district, Li Wanlong's understanding of the Axe Gang was incomparable to that of an ordinary person. He knew Scarface. Although he'd only been in the Axe Gang for a few years, he was quite skilled. In such a short time, he'd managed to sneak his way to the position of squad leader. Scarface had always been active in the secret regions near Black Ox Town. Over the past few years, he'd robbed at least 800 townsfolk, if not 1,000. Previously, he'd heard that Scarface wanted to rob Wu Di and had almost killed him in the Forbidden Region. Li Wanlong knew all this, but he deliberately refrained from sending anyone to rescue him. As for Zhao Yi, he knew even more about him. He'd been a member of the Axe Gang's branch in Raging Flame City ever since. Since he was the Axe Gang's oldest member, he was now the branch's leader, second only to one. He was also at the peak of entering immortality. Zhao Ye's strength, and even the branch leaders, weren't enough to pose a threat to Yi Zichen. However, the head of the Axe Gang's branch was extremely favored in the headquarters. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been assigned to Raging Flame City as a branch head. Furthermore, Zhao Yi was the branch leader's face. If Yi Zichen dared attack him, even if he didn't kill him, so long as he injured him, the branch leader would definitely make trouble for him. Then, the Axe Gang's headquarters would be dragged into the matter. So long as he ran into headquarters, Yi Zichen wouldn't be able to live a good life, even with his peerless divine abilities. What's more, the Axe Gang was backed by the Sky Great District's Green Gang. Even in the 72 districts, they were a peak faction. As he considered this, Li Wanlong couldn't help but shake his head and snort. Only then did he remember the kneeling servant. "All right, you've done well. Go." "Hey!" The kneeling servant's legs went weak. When he got to his feet, he almost fell to the ground again. With great difficulty, he steadied himself and prepared to leave. "Wait!" Li Wanlong called out to him. The servant gulped, turned around, and saw a bag of money tossed at him. "Here's your reward." "Thank you, steward." The servant thanked him profusely, then left the courtyard. Li Wanlong, who'd always been on tenterhooks, smiled contentedly, then drained his cup of immortal brew. "Yi Zichen, oh Yi Zichen, since you provoked the Axe Gang, I'm afraid you won't have a good time. Also, Wu Di, your good days are coming to an end." Chapter 1042. I can't believe it has such a quirk. The afterglow of the setting sun illuminated the clouds in the sky, dyeing the 9 heavens outside Black Ox Town with a tinge of red. The ancient gravel road outside the town was surrounded by towering ancient trees and jagged rock. However, the surroundings of this desolate and uninhabited ancient path were currently filled with people. These people were all residents of Black Ox Town. They scrambled to find a suitable place to settle down, leaving an area roughly 300 meters wide open. Yi Zichen walked out of the town, his heart filled with emotion. He stopped in the center of the town, then looked at Scarface, Zhao Yi, and the others with a complicated expression. "Tell me, what do you want?" The Axe Gang was truly too kind. Even Yi Zichen's tone toward them was much gentler. "What do you want?" Scarface snorted with a sinister expression. He was finally out. Scarface was truly excited. He'd been worried that Yi Zichen would refuse to leave the city, but to his surprise, he'd managed to swindle him out with just 10,000 spirit coins. Although 10,000 spirit coins was not a small amount, as long as he dared to leave the city, it would all be worth it. For the past few days, he had been having nightmares day after day. Now, he finally had a chance to get rid of this inner demon. When the time came, he would definitely rob him of every single spirit coin he had. He would also rob him of his temporary residence permit so that he wouldn't be able to return to town. Don't forget to grab his pants. Not only his pants, but also his fig leaf. There were so many onlookers around, but he was just like a sightseeing animal in front of them. Just thinking about it made these scar-faced men excited. They rubbed their palms together and prepared to fight. When he saw her excited expression, Yi Zichen's expression turned somewhat strange. He couldn't help but mutter to himself, could it be that he was robbed? Yi Zichen couldn't help but gasp when he thought of that, but he didn't expose her. The world was full of wonders, so it was normal for her to have some special hobbies. Moreover, they were here to give him money, and he had no way to repay them. He could only return the favor by robbing them thoroughly. However, Yi Zichen still felt a bit guilty, so he couldn't help but speak up. "Brother Yu, I really don't know what to say. Why don't we forget it? I'll just return to the city." Yi Zichen put on a troubled expression, then turned around to leave. It wasn't easy for anyone to earn money, but this Scarface kept giving him money. Could it be that he was the reincarnation of the god of wealth? "You want to leave?" As Scarface roared, his lackeys surrounded Yi Zichen. "Now you know fear? Let me tell you, it's too late." Scarface no longer feared Yi Zichen in the slightest. All of Yi Zichen's actions were expressions of fear. If he really was a peerless expert, he wouldn't have done so many unnecessary actions. The more Yi Zichen feared, the more excited Scarface became. With a sinister smile, he took a few steps forward and stood outside the encirclement of his subordinates. "Don't say that your Grandpa Scar is ruthless. As long as you take out all the money you have on you and take off your clothes, I'll spare your life." "Nanny? Take off my pants?" Yi Zichen felt his chrysanthemum clench. He subconsciously put his hand on his butt and looked at Scarface in shock. So he had this kind of hobby? This hobby couldn't be allowed to exist. Zhao Yi approached from a distance. Previously, he'd been unsure of Yi Zichen's strength. However, they'd already been out of the city for so long, yet Yi Zichen showed no signs of wanting to make a move. If Yi Zichen were an expert, Zhao Yi didn't think any expert would have such a perverted hobby. Yi Zichen's actions showed that he was truly afraid. After coming to this conclusion, Zhao Yi stepped forward. This was a juicy piece of meat. He couldn't let Scarface snatch it away. "Brother Yi, you know full well how difficult it is to earn money in this place. Just take what you got from Scarface and return it." Zhao Yi wasn't as irascible as Scarface. His tone sounded more like a consolation than a threat. Yi Zichen, who was still worried about his butt, couldn't help but arch his brows. "So you want to rob me? Did you really think Grandpa Scarface was here to rob you?" Scarface was as arrogant as he could be. When he saw his protruding jaw, Yi Zichen was worried it might dislocate. "Scarface, what are you talking about?" Zhao Yi scolded Scarface with a frown. Then he said in a comforting tone, "Brother Yi, the word snatch is a bit too much. We're just casually taking back what belongs to us and teaching Brother Yi a lesson. In this mortal great district, only the Axe Gang takes from others. No one has ever taken from us. Brother Ye's treasures can be used as tuition for this lesson." "So that's how it is." Yi Zichen's expression was still distressed, as if he were hesitating about whether or not to hand over his treasures. If he didn't, these two would definitely try to rob him. He wasn't the type to suffer losses, so he'd definitely be robbed. But he couldn't bear to rob them. It really was a difficult choice. "Brother Yi, cultivation isn't easy. Money is just a worldly possession, so just hand it over." Zhao Ye's words of consolation seemed to move Yi Zichen. He nodded solemnly, reached into his robes, and reluctantly took out a spatial ring, along with the 20,000 spirit coins they'd given him. He tossed them over. Yi Zichen reached out and caught the ring. When he probed its interior with his immortal awareness, Zhao Yi, who'd been pretending to be nice this whole time, opened the ring. Jug after jug of immortal brew poured out and shattered on the ground. Yi Zichen's heart ached as he watched. When the last jug of immortal brew shattered, bang! Zhao Yi slammed the ring into the ground and his aura surged. "You tricked me!" Zhao Yi released a violent aura from his body. Gusts of wind howled around him, and the surrounding ancient trees swayed uncontrollably. "Hey, what are you doing?" Yi Zichen pretended to be innocent. "You told me to give you all my treasures, and I've already given them all. What else do you want? I want treasures. I want treasures. Zhao Ye's mood was explosive, even more so than Scarface's. He pointed at the shattered jugs of wine, his expression incomparably savage. What's all this? Several hundred spirit coins worth of immortal brew? Am I a 3-year-old or something? Bang! Yi Zichen kicked the jugs of wine into the air. His heart ached as he looked at the shattered jugs of wine. What else do you want? I've already given you all my treasures. Yi Zichen's expression was as innocent as could be. He truly felt wronged. As he looked at his innocent face, Zhao Yi snorted and shook his head. He was already certain that Yi Zichen was just toying with them. Saying anything more would be pointless. Chapter 1043. This money was his tuition? A ray of light flashed through Wu Di's bedroom. When the light faded, Wu Di opened his eyes from his cross-legged position on his bed. Mid-stage entering immortality. As he sensed his body brimming with power, Wu Di's eyes flashed with delight. I have to tell Master and make him happy. By now, Yi Zichen was practically Wu Di's sky. If there was anything worth celebrating, he'd be the first to share it with him. This breakthrough was no exception. He leaped to the ground and ran to Yi Zichen's door. Master! No one was there. When he arrived at the courtyard, he didn't see Yi Zichen's shadow, but he sensed that Yi Zichen had set up a soundproofing seal. Wu Di, what are you doing here? Senior Yi is fighting the Axe Gang. Don't you dare go in and help? At that moment, someone shouted from outside the courtyard. When Wu Di heard that, he hurriedly ran out. What did you say? My master is fighting with the people of the Axe Gang. Where are they now? They're probably at the northern gate. I got the news from a friend and… Before the man could finish speaking, he saw Wu Di transform into a streak of light and vanish before the man's eyes. He sensed Wu Di's spiritual pressure as he fled. Mid-stage entering immortality. Before Yi Zichen appeared, Wu Di was weak. Although Black Ox Town knew he was a member of the Wu family, no one paid him any attention. It wasn't until Yi Zichen appeared that the people of Black Ox Town started paying attention to Wu Di. They never would have guessed that in just half a month, Wu Di would become a mid-stage entering immortality expert. Senior Yi is truly a god. The heart suppressor sighed inwardly, then transformed into a beam of light no weaker than Wu Di's and shot toward the northern gate. Bro, what are you doing? Yi Zichen watched as Zhao Yi and his subordinates surrounded him, and Scarface's subordinates stood guard. Yi Zichen sighed helplessly. A harmonious society requires harmonious development. I've already done as you said. Look at you, why did you have so many people surround me? Hurry up and let me go back to the city. If my disciple discovers I'm not here, he'll panic. Disciple? The dark-faced Zhao Yi laughed disdainfully, then walked past his subordinates and stood in front of Yi Zichen. He patted Yi Zichen's face. Don't worry about others. You should think about what to do with yourself. But don't worry. That disciple of yours should be Wu Di of the Wu family, right? Once I've dealt with him, I'll naturally go find him. So, there's no room for discussion. At first, there was room for discussion, but you wasted this opportunity. With a sinister smile, Zhao Yi took a step back and waved at his lackeys, go. A streak of urgent light streaked through Black Ox Town. It was none other than Yi Zichen's disciple, Wu Di. To tell the truth, Wu Di had absolute confidence in Yi Zichen. Nothing unexpected would happen. However, it was better to be safe than sorry. Now that his master was in trouble, even though he was weak as a disciple, he still had to stand by his master's side and help him resolve the problem. He hurriedly raised his speed to the limit. By the time he reached the outskirts of Black Ox Town, at ease. Attention. Look to the right. Look forward. A familiar order entered Wu Di's ears. When he hurried over, he saw a group of bruised men grimacing in pain. Their clothes had a hatchet embroidered on their chests, and they stood in 3 rows. In front of them stood two others. One was a dark-skinned man, and the other was shockingly Scarface, who'd tried to steal Woody's sword. Their injuries were clearly far more severe than the men behind them, especially Scarface. His entire face was swollen, and his eyes were so swollen that only a slit remained in his eye sockets. Meanwhile, Yi Zichen stood in front of them, watching them coldly like a military instructor. At the same time, Wu Di heard the townspeople gasp in surprise. Senior Yi is too fierce. That's right. Did you see it clearly? He knocked them all out in less than 3 seconds. It seems he didn't even use any immortal spiritual energy. He's really too strong. I think he's at least as strong as an earth immortal. Puh. An earth immortal? At least a sky immortal. Do you think Senior Yi might be an immortal king? When some of the onlookers said this, the ones who worshipped Yi Zichen calmly shook their heads. An immortal king. Even in the Sky Great District, that was a peerless existence. Although Yi Zichen's lightning-quick methods had shocked them, an immortal king. They didn't even dare think about it. Hey, isn't that Senior Ye's disciple, Wu Di? Someone in the crowd noticed Wu Di's presence. Instantly, they crowded around him and asked him all sorts of questions. Just how strong is Senior Yi? An earth immortal? A sky immortal? Or an immortal king? You're his disciple, so you should know, right? Why aren't you saying anything? Why aren't you saying anything? When he saw the crowd swarming towards him, Wu Di had no choice but to unleash his mid-stage entering immortality spiritual energy and push them aside. Then, he ran towards Yi Zichen. Mid-stage entering immortality. Do any of you know how strong Wu Di was before Senior Yi appeared? He seemed to be a spiritual body. The onlookers were stunned speechless. In just half a month, he'd gone from a spiritual body to a mid-stage entering immortality cultivator? Was this Yi Zichen really an immortal king? For a moment, the townspeople looked at Yi Zichen with reverence and reverence. Yi Zichen had no idea that he'd already become a god among the townspeople. Right now, he was in the middle of teaching the Axe Gang a lesson. Peep, peep, peep. He slapped them on the back of their heads. Those who were slapped on the back of their heads didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Oh, Blackface! Why did you have to do this? How many times did I tell you to let me go? You just wouldn't listen. Now that you've been beaten, do you feel better? Zhao Yi smiled apologetically. Deep down, he hated Scarface to the bone. Of course, he was also speechless about Yi Zichen. You're a mighty expert above the earth immortal level. Why are you hanging around in a small place like Black Ox Town? You even put on a cowardly front. Aren't you trying to tempt me into committing a crime? Of course, Zhao Yi didn't dare say any of this out loud. All he could do was nod and bow like a grandson. And you, Scarface? After taking care of Zhao Yi, Yi Zichen walked over to Scarface and patted him on the shoulder in exasperation. Don't you remember? I already took care of you once. Why are you so shameless? Child of wealth, you've come to my place of wealth? Master. At that moment, Yi Zichen heard Wu Di's voice. When he saw Wu Di, Yi Zichen instantly smiled. What are you doing here? Your apprentice just left seclusion. I heard you got into a fight with the Axe Gang, so I hurried over. Wu Di pressed his lips into a smile, then pointed at the bruised and battered men. It's them. Of course it's them. You're so busy every day, yet you're still training them every day. My dear apprentice, don't you think I'm too kind? They're clearly not my subordinates, but I'm still doing my best to teach them. Yi Zichen put his arm around Wu Di's shoulders. He didn't act like a master at all. Wu Di understood Yi Zichen's temperament. He was just that sort of easygoing person, but he couldn't break the rules. He removed Yi Zichen's hand, took a step back, and bowed. You're right, master. You brat. Yi Zichen knew that Wu Di was warning him that they were master and apprentice. Furthermore, there were so many onlookers, so he shouldn't act too casually. Yi Zichen shrugged helplessly, then turned his gaze to Zhao Yi, Scarface, and the others. How about this? Since you're here too, my apprentice, why don't you go take all their treasures? Wu Di had long since anticipated this outcome, so he didn't hesitate. He approached Scarface and Zhao Yi. Brother Yi. Zhao Ye's expression darkened. He couldn't hand over his treasures. He was a man who loved money, and he carried all of his wealth with him almost every day. If he handed it over, then his hundreds of years of playing around would have been wasted. Slap. To his surprise, Wu Di, who'd gone to collect the money, slapped him on the head and shouted, "My master told you to hand it over, so just hand it over. If my master wants you to hand it over, then hand it over. What's with all this nonsense? Do you want to get beaten up again? Let me tell you, this money isn't for nothing. It's tuition, understand? You think you can rob others, but others can't rob you? What, Brother Yi? Is my master someone you can call brother?" After spending so much time with Yi Zichen, Wu Di had more or less absorbed some of Yi Zichen's personality. When he heard Wu Di's explanation, Yi Zichen found it funny, but he nodded in satisfaction. Chapter 1044. Forming a grudge, Master, I've collected your tuition fees. After walking around the Axe gang members, Wu Di's hands were piled high with spatial pouches and even a few spatial rings. It didn't matter whether they'd willingly given up their money or if they'd been intimidated by Yi Zichen's tyranny. So long as they had the image of a small axe on their chests, including Zhao Yi, they obediently handed over their savings. Let me see. Yi Zichen accepted the spatial pouches and rings. Quite a few of them had left their soul imprints on them. Zhao Yi was one of them. Just now, he'd handed over half of his life's savings. How could he possibly just give them to Yi Zichen just like that? When he handed them over, he'd left his own soul imprint on them. Once he returned to the gang, so long as he begged the gang leader to help him, he'd be able to use his soul imprint to locate Yi Zichen effortlessly. But how could such petty tricks escape Yi Zichen's notice? He wiped away all the spatial pouches and rings' soul imprint. Instantly, countless people coughed up blood. Their hearts and souls were wounded. You're seeking death. There was still blood at the corner of Zhao Ye's mouth, but he ignored the injuries on his body and shouted. He was no longer as calm and collected as he was at the beginning. His eyes were bloodshot, and his already pitch-black face had turned a purplish-red color due to the surge of blood qi. His bloodshot eyes brimmed with undisguisable fury. He looked as if he wanted to fight Yi Zichen to the death. Yi Zichen picked at his ear, then frowned in displeasure. "Good disciple, tell him to behave." His voice was so loud it almost deafened me. "As you command." Wu Di cupped his fists and took a few steps back, then frowned and walked up to Zhao Yi. "You little animal, you'd best think this through. Zhao Yi hadn't even finished speaking when he felt a harsh slap on his left cheek. The force of the slap was so great that even his ears were ringing. This slap had been a bit forceful, and Wu Di's hand turned red from the recoil. He shook his hand repeatedly, then snorted sharply, "Lower your voice. Lower your voice. Didn't you hear my master say that you almost made him deaf? You still want to threaten me? Don't you know who you are now? If it weren't for my master's kindness, you would have been chopped up and fed to the dogs." In truth, this was Wu Di's original appearance. However, his identity was a bit awkward, so he'd pretended to be like this in order to preserve his life. Ever since he'd taken Yi Zichen as his master, coupled with his recent breakthroughs, he'd regained his confidence. What's more, he'd been by Yi Zichen's side for a long time, so he'd learned quite a bit how to shoot his mouth off. Zhao Yi was enraged. He glared at Wu Di, but to his surprise, he slapped him across the face again, then glared at Zhao Yi without the slightest bit of cowardice. "Stare? Can your stare be bigger than mine? You're still glaring at me? Do you believe that I won't gouge out your eyes, throw them on the ground and crush them for fun?" Yi Zichen looked at Wu Di's sharp tongue in astonishment. He'd never known his apprentice had this side to him. However, this was even better. It would save him the trouble of teaching her in the future. No matter how he looked at his apprentice, he was satisfied. Yi Zichen nodded and smiled in satisfaction, then sent his immortal awareness into Zhao Ye's spatial ring. When he saw the wealth inside, he subconsciously sucked in a breath of cold air. No wonder Zhao Yi was so excited. Never mind everything else, just the ring alone contained more than 1,000,000 spirit coins. There were also countless pills, talismans, and treasures. As for the other spatial rings and pouches, although they weren't as frightening as Zhao Ye's, put together, they were more or less the same. They were worth millions of spirit coins. Sure enough, robbing people was the fastest way to earn money. Yi Zichen had heard from his apprentice that if you went treasure hunting in the nearby secret realms and didn't come across any fortuitous encounters, you'd only earn a few hundred spirit coins per trip. If you relied solely on going to the secret realms to earn this much wealth, how long would it take? As he sighed inwardly, he glanced at Zhao Yi, Scarface, and the others. Tears of gratitude welled up in his eyes. They really were good people. After being slapped twice by Wu Di, Zhao Yi could no longer contain his fury. Just what kind of status did he have? He was the #1 captain of the Axe Gang, second only to one and above millions. Never mind the fact that the Axe Gang members had to respectfully greet him as Sir Zhao. Even the heads of Raging Flame City's aristocratic families had to treat him with caution. From the day he'd joined the Axe Gang, he'd been the only one who'd stolen from others and beaten them. But now someone else had stolen from him, and even beaten him up. If it were just Yi Zichen beating him up, that would be one thing. He wasn't strong enough to blame others. But now that little bastard from the Wu family had dared hit him too, and he'd even slapped him twice. Little bastard, you're looking to die. Suddenly, the power of a peak entering immortality surged out of his body. He naturally didn't dare kill Wu Di, but he wanted to prove himself. He was a peak entering immortality expert, and he had his dignity. However, he only managed to raise his aura for an instant, when he sensed another aura no weaker than his own. Wu Di. It was actually Wu Di. If you have the guts, say what you just said one more time. Believe it or not, I'll have you report to the river Styx right now. Instantly, Zhao Yi felt as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over his head. Although he'd injured Yi Zichen's soul, he was now at least as strong as a mid-stage entering immortality expert. If Wu Di's spiritual power was on par with his, didn't that mean he was also? How was that possible? If he really was that talented, why would the Wu family send him to Black Ox Town? Didn't the Wu family want to rise to the profound Great District? Suddenly, Zhao Ye's gaze landed on Scarface. When he sensed his gaze, Scarface knew that Zhao Yi hated him. But now, he had to suffer in silence. He couldn't even voice his bitterness. Just half a month ago, Wu Di hadn't even reached the spiritual body level. Who would have thought he'd become so strong? Could this really be the legendary saying that a scholar who has been away for 3 days must be looked at in a new light? But he didn't dare say anything. All he could do was bury Wu Di in his neck, his expression bitter. That's enough, my good disciple. Don't scare them. We're law-abiding people. How could we willfully slaughter the innocent? Besides, they've given us such a huge gift. For your sake, how about you let them go? Yi Zichen, who'd been watching from the sidelines all this time, stepped forward and patted Wu Di on the shoulder. In truth, Wu Di was just saying it for fun. If he really killed Zhao Yi, it might cause his master unnecessary trouble. Coincidentally, Yi Zichen gave him a way out of this embarrassing situation, so he stepped forward and snorted. For my master's sake, I'll spare their worthless lives. In the future, don't ever let me see you again. If I do, I'll break your dog legs. He was simply too satisfied with this little disciple of his. He reached out and patted Wu Di on the head, then his smile faded and he turned to Zhao Yi. Hurry up and leave. My disciple won't listen to me. If he goes back on his word, I won't be able to stop him. Zhao Yi gnashed his teeth, glared at Wu Di and Yi Zichen, then snorted unhappily. Chapter 1045. Take off your pants. Zhao Ye's vicious words didn't really have much substance to them. Their enmity had been sown long ago when he'd robbed Scarface. He was only saying this to save some face in front of the townsfolk of Black Ox Town. Yi Zichen simply laughed it off, but when Wu Di heard this, he was furious. How dare you hoot around, huh? Master, don't stop me. I'll smash his dog head in. Wu Di roared angrily and charged forward. Yi Zichen naturally knew exactly what he meant. Yi Zichen reached out and grabbed Wu Di's arm, then shouted at Zhao Yi and the others. Hurry up and run. At the same time, Wu Di looked like he was struggling with all his might. Master, let go. Your apprentice has to smash his dog head in. Don't stop me. My temper. Hurry up and run. Yi Zichen had played the good guy all the way to the end. Judging from how real his expression was, it would be unfair not to give him an Oscar. Zhao Yi wasn't quite sure what this master and disciple duo were up to, but he knew that if they really fought, he might not necessarily be Wu Di's match. Zhao Yi didn't dare hesitate. He hurriedly shouted at his subordinate. Let's go. Under the watchful eyes of the townsfolk, the vast procession fled in panic. Scarface wanted to blend in with the group and leave, but before he could take more than a few steps, he heard a nightmarish voice calling out to him. You! Wait! Yi Zichen didn't say who it was, but Scarface knew full well who it was. He could only grimace and obediently stop. Grandpa, please spare me just this once. Scarface truly broke down. He never would have guessed that Yi Zichen was so strong. Even Zhao Yi couldn't do anything to him. When he heard Scarface's tone, he was on the verge of tears, but Yi Zichen simply smiled warmly and walked up to him. Don't be nervous. You just gave me a huge gift. How could I possibly do anything to you? Don't you think so? Scarface knelt on the ground, unable to voice his bitterness. What was going on? He'd been robbed once, and that was one thing. Now that he'd finally managed to regroup and find the Axe Gang's captain to avenge him, Yi Zichen and the others had robbed him again. Not only had his years of savings gone up in smoke, but Zhao Yi had also been robbed clean by them. He was a little worried about how he would face his immediate superior when he returned to the Axe Gang. The more Scarface thought about it, the more nervous he became. However, the most important thing he had to do now was to get past this fiend in front of him. My lord, you're right. I'm really blind. Just look at how young and ignorant I am. Just let me go this time. If you let me go, I will definitely burn incense and pray to Buddha for you when I return. Scarface's tone was especially sincere. If he had patted his chest twice and shed 2 lines of tears, the effect might have been even better. Yi Zichen smiled wryly and shook his head. Burning incense and praying to Buddha is one thing, but this. Take off your pants. The matter with the Axe Gang finally came to an end. Scarface ran off once more, but naked. However, this time, he did so under the watchful eyes of countless people. Quite a few Black Ox Town residents even recorded this scene with jade slip. When the townspeople looked at Yi Zichen, their gazes were filled with reverence. In the Mortal Great District, he was the only person who dared provoke the Axe Gang like this. Furthermore, in their hearts, Yi Zichen might very well have reached the Immortal King level. This sort of existence was as rare as phoenix feathers and Qilin horns in the Sky Great District. For him to appear in their Mortal Great District, they couldn't help but be astonished. Little did they know, at the same time, on the ancient road from Black Ox Town to Raging Flame City, it was impossible to tell what Zhao Ye's expression was, but he was currently sitting on a strange boulder by the side of the road. His lackeys stood behind him. Not long after, Scarface, who had his pants stolen, appeared in their line of sight with his butt bare. Despite having his pants stolen, Scarface wasn't as devastated as he'd been at the start. He seemed somewhat used to it. It was just that his sense of shame left him a little embarrassed. Right now, he wasn't thinking about revenge. The only thing on his mind was how to face Zhao Yi. To his surprise, however, Zhao Yi, the person he'd been so worried about this whole time, was waiting for him not too far away. On the ancient path, Scarface's body stiffened. After a brief moment of hesitation, he patted his face and ran towards Zhao Yi with a wide smile. "Captain, how could this lowly one make you wait for me here?" Zhao Yi, who was sitting on the rock, glanced at him. When he saw that he was naked, he pointed at the ancient tree with his right hand. The ancient tree's leaves scattered to the ground and then floated into the air. It was as if a thread had passed through them and turned into a grass skirt that landed beside Scarface. "Just make do with it. We've all been robbed by him. We don't have any clothes for you." "Sir." Tears of gratitude flashed through Scarface's eyes. He covered his forehead, put on the grass skirt, and fell to the ground, choking with sobs. "Sir, you're too good to me. I've tricked you this time. Once we return to the gang, I'll definitely do my best to make up for your losses." Zhao Yi was still holding a grudge against Scarface, but when he sensed his true feelings, he could only sigh and let it go. "Forget it. If it wasn't for my own will, I wouldn't have come here. If you want to blame someone, you can only blame yourself for not being skilled enough." "How can you blame, sir? If you want to blame someone, blame that Yi guy," Scarface snorted. "He's clearly an expert, but he just had the bad taste of pretending to be weak and tricking Sir into falling into his trap. If you want to blame someone, blame that Yi guy for being too evil. That's right. That Yi guy really went a little overboard." Zhao Ye's expression instantly darkened. His fist fiercely hammered the odd-looking stone beside the ancient path. Suddenly, the odd-looking stone collapsed and turned into countless fragments. Scarface and the others were frightened out of their wits. Zhao Yi snorted with a dark expression. "We can't just let this go." "That's right. We can't just let this go," Scarface shouted with his chest puffed out. "You think so too, don't you?" Zhao Yi glanced at Scarface, his eyes gleaming with arrogance. "Ever since our axe gang was founded, it's always us who rob others. When have we ever let others rob us? When we get back, come with me to see the leader. I'll make sure to teach that Yi guy a lesson. I'll make sure to teach him a lesson," Scarface shouted again. "I'll make sure to teach him a lesson." The surrounding lackeys also followed suit and shouted their slogans. Their shouts seemed to be able to shake the heavens. Zhao Yi, who stood at the front of the group, nodded in satisfaction. Then he waved his hand and snorted. "Let's go back to the branch." Only then did Scarface let out a long sigh. Life was like a drama. It all depended on one's acting skills. If his acting hadn't been on point, he might very well have lost his life. Zhao Yi felt that Yi Zichen had fallen for provoking the Axe Gang, but Scarface felt that the Axe Gang had fallen for provoking that fiend, Yi Zichen. As for seeking revenge on Yi Zichen, that was nonsense. Scarface understood now. Seeking revenge on Yi Zichen wasn't very likely, but it seemed that being Yi Zichen's lackey had a better future than staying with the Axe Gang. Especially now that Yi Zichen only had Wu Di by his side. If he forsook the darkness and joined the light, he'd become a senior figure. As he considered this, Scarface felt more and more convinced. Furthermore, it seemed that Yi Zichen didn't have any enmity towards him. It seemed he had to find a way to defect to Yi Zichen. After the Axe Gang members left, the townsfolk tactfully returned to the city. However, as they did so, they were especially excited. This was the Axe Gang. Yi Zichen had beaten them so badly that they didn't even dare let out a fart. As for those who'd once been robbed by the Axe Gang, although they hadn't done it themselves, they were secretly delighted just by watching. Before long, only Yi Zichen and Wu Di remained outside the city gate. "Master." When everyone else had left, Wu Di scratched his head in embarrassment. It had been at least a dozen years since he'd last talked trash about the Axe Gang. Now that they'd all left, he really felt a bit embarrassed when he thought back to what he'd said. "Just now You were pretty good just now." Yi Zichen nodded in satisfaction, then encouraged him. Sometimes it's important to talk big. You might lose, but you can't lose in spirit. You know that, right? It doesn't matter whether or not you can beat them, you have to talk big. In the future, you can talk as much as you want. Don't worry, you still have your master's support. Also, there's something like what you and I did just now. Do you know? Yes, master. Wu Di cupped his hands, then saw Yi Zichen toss him a few spatial pouches and spatial rings. I'll leave them all to you. Wu Di put the spatial pouches and rings away, then was about to say something when he noticed that Yi Zichen's brows were tightly knit. Master? Yi Zichen's brows knit together, but he quickly composed himself. These Axe gang members really were never-ending. Next, he retracted his gaze and looked at Wu Di. Apprentice, let's not stay in Black Ox Town any longer. Let's go to Raging Flame City. He couldn't just let them come knocking on his door all the time. It was impolite not to reciprocate. Yi Zichen felt. Chapter 1046. What a peerless beauty! Yi Zichen's words came out of the blue. Wu Di still had quite a few things he'd left behind in his residence, so he couldn't leave just like that. Instead, he delayed it for a full 3 days. In truth, it wasn't Wu Di who delayed it, but Yi Zichen. In 3 days, Yi Zichen bought practically all of Black Ox Town's immortal wine. He even coaxed, tricked, and threatened the taverns to buy what they had in stock. All of Black Ox Town's drunkards cried for half a month before the town produced a new batch of immortal wine. However, thanks to Yi Zichen's hunger marketing, the price had risen considerably. Black Ox Town's taverns saw this as a business opportunity. As a result, the drunkards cursed Black Ox Town behind their back. However, the wine merchants were extremely grateful to Yi Zichen. In short, it wasn't just slander or praise. Yi Zichen was no longer in Black Ox Town. He was on his way to Raging Flame City. On the ancient path, filled with ancient trees and rugged rocks, the two figures on the ancient path appeared to be especially down and out. One of them was a black-robed man. He held a flask of alcohol and poured it into his mouth. Beside him was another man. He held a map in his hand and was studying it attentively. "My dear apprentice, how much longer until we get to Raging Flame City?" The man with the flask burped, then found a rock and sat down on the side of the road. The youth beside him frowned helplessly. "I'm afraid we'll have to walk for a few more days." "A few more days?" The man leapt to his feet and pointed angrily at the path. "We've been walking for a few days, right? Now you're telling me how many more days we have? Did you see the wrong map? Let me have a look." After snatching the map, the young man spread his hands helplessly. "Then who can you blame? I told you long ago that Raging Flame City wasn't as close as you thought, and I told you to take the transfer formation. However, you swore you wanted to experience the God Realm's limitless beauty." After hearing this, the man sat down with a dejected look. In truth, these two were none other than Yi Zichen and Wu Di. Before setting off, Wu Di had indeed told him to take the spatial transfer formation. However, Yi Zichen had just arrived in the God Realm and hadn't had a chance to take a stroll. He wanted to take this opportunity to enjoy the scenery along the way. If he got hungry, he might even be able to hunt some game. But all of this was what he wanted, wild game. Not to mention wild game, he didn't even see a single wild ant. Along the way, he had only been drinking and hadn't eaten a single bite of meat. His mouth was so bland that it was almost water. Moreover, the scenery along the way was not as beautiful as he had imagined. Other than the strangely shaped rocks, there were also ancient trees that looked almost the same. He had only looked at it for half a day, but he was already tired of looking at it. How regretful! "Why don't we go back?" Yi Zichen probed. When Wu Di heard this, he laughed bitterly. "Master, don't even think about it. It'll take us a few days to go back. By that time, we might have already arrived. You don't have to complain here. Just walk forward obediently." Heavens! Yi Zichen collapsed to the ground as if on the verge of a mental breakdown. Wu Di couldn't help but want to laugh. He'd been with his master for so long, he'd long since grown accustomed to his master's personality. He reached out and grabbed Yizichen's arm, but at that moment, whoosh, 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 several black-clothed figures, so fast that their shadows were barely visible, flashed past them like streaks of lightning. One of them even slammed into Yizichen, causing him to tumble several times. "You're seeking death," the black-robed man shouted angrily, but he was rebuked by his teammates in front of him. "You're lucky." The black-robed man glared viciously at Yizichen, then turned into a bolt of lightning and disappeared into the distance. "Hey, I've got a bad temper." He rose to his feet, his face ashen. "That bastard bumped into him, then threatened him." Yizichen furrowed his brows, but just as he was about to chase after them, he noticed a spatial ring beneath his feet. Where did this come from? Yizichen fiddled with the ring. It was warm to the touch, and there was an exquisite red gemstone on it. The jewel was constantly glowing. The warmth of the ring must be coming from this jewel. What the hell is this? Just as he was about to extend his immortal awareness into the ring to investigate. Rumble. The earth trembled. Before long, a group of horses appeared before Yizichen. Their fur was azure and their heads blazed with blue flames. "Spectral ghost horses!" Wu Di shouted in shock. Yizichen glanced at the horses and arched his brows. "What is it? Are these horses that strong?" "Master, don't you know what spectral ghost horses are?" Wu Di's shock was palpable. His master truly did have some sort of heaven-defying ability, but sometimes he wondered if his master was even from the god realm. He always asked a bunch of pointless questions. This specter ghost horse is considered a relatively high-grade mount. It can only be found near the river Styx. An adult spectral ghost horse is even faster than an immortal king. If they were auctioned off, they'd fetch at least 100 million spirit coins. What's more important isn't its value, but its status. Anyone who can ride such a mount is someone of considerable status in the 72 districts. All right then. Yizichen shrugged indifferently. Compared to this 100 million spirit beast, he was more concerned about the person riding it. A woman sat atop the horse. She wore red clothes, but although her robes were loose, they couldn't hide her fiery figure. Her long, pitch-black hair was casually tied into a ponytail, and her exquisite features were as natural as ever. So long as you laid eyes on her, it was hard to look away. However, such a beautiful woman's eyebrows were knitted together at this moment, and there was a faint trace of anxiety in her eyes. Even so, that didn't affect her beauty in the slightest. What an exquisite beauty! Everyone loved beauty. The woman before Yizichen was truly a rare beauty. His admiration came from the bottom of his heart, but it was limited to admiration. It didn't mean he'd actually taken a liking to her. Yizichen glanced at her briefly, then looked away. He cared more about what was inside the ring than the beauty. "Stop!" At that moment, a voice rang out in Yizichen's ears, and he felt as if he'd been enveloped by someone. When he looked up, he saw that the woman he'd praised was already standing before him. The closer she got, the more Yizichen felt that she really was pretty. What's more, there was an air of heroism about her that made her gentle beauty seem a bit more resolute. "You guys keep chasing after her." The woman on the spectral ghost horse turned to a group of people nearby. They immediately nodded and dashed forward. Then, to everyone's surprise, the woman jumped off the ghost horse. Her exquisite eyes flashed with sharpness as she stared intently at Yizichen. Being handsome is also a sin. When he sensed the woman's gaze, Yizichen couldn't help but sigh. He helplessly patted Wu Di on the shoulder. "Apprentice, have you seen your master's charm?" Wu Di broke out in a cold sweat. This woman was obviously here to make trouble for them. "Master, stop messing around. I'd rather not talk to you. You're still young. There's no way you can understand how your master feels." Yizichen acted as if he hadn't heard Wu Di's warning at all. His eyes were filled with helplessness, and he produced a pen. Do you want my contact information or my horoscope? If you want my signature, how about I sign here? With that, Yi Zichen's pen-wielding hand reached towards the woman's chest. The woman's face instantly turned ashen. She gnashed her teeth and cursed. Chapter 1047. Even if you're secretly in love with me. As soon as the red-robed woman gave the order, 2 squads of 16 people surrounded Yi Zichen and Wu Di on the path. Yi Zichen's hand hovered in midair. As he looked at the menacing, muscular men, he angrily retracted his hand and laughed. Hey, what are you doing? This is just our first meeting. Even if you think I'm handsome and extraordinary, and you've long since fallen in love with me, you can't just let them snatch me away to get married, can you? How about this? Give me some time to prepare. When the time comes, I'll naturally go to your manor and ask for your hand in marriage. What do you think? Yi Zichen acted as if he hadn't even noticed the woman's icy expression. His words were frivolous. However, before the woman in red could speak, a girl with her hair tied up in a bun stood by her side. She put her hands on her hips, pointed at his nose and scolded, "Impudent! How could my big sister possibly fall for a lecher like you? You'd best take back what you just said, or I'll cut out your tongue. Let's see if you can still say such frivolous things." The girl looked like she hadn't even reached adulthood yet. Her face was still childish. Even though she had her hands on her waist and looked very angry, when paired with her little Lolita face, this rebuke was less dignified. Yi Zichen reached out and patted the girl's head with a smile, then pursed his lips. "How old are you? Get your filthy hands off me. Do you know who I am? How dare you touch my head?" The girl angrily slapped Yi Zichen's hand away, her bright eyes brimming with fury. "Then do you know who I am?" asked Yi Zichen with a smile after the girl slapped his hand away. I don't care who you are." She rolled her eyes, only to see Yi Zichen pat her on the head once more. "I'm telling you, I'm your brother-in-law. How dare you call your brother-in-law's hands dirty? I'm afraid your big sister's going to scold you." "You're talking nonsense." The girl was clearly furious. She wanted to reason with him. At that moment, the woman in red, who'd been glaring coldly at Yi Zichen the entire time, called out to her. "Bei, sit in the carriage." "But sister, you don't want to listen to me, do you? Then I'll have someone send you back." "Oh, got it." She reluctantly returned to the carriage, but before she did, she glared viciously at Yi Zichen, then entered the carriage and lowered the curtains. "Children are just too immature. They can't see your feelings for me at all. Beauty, what do you think of what I said just now? If you think it's okay, why don't you leave me your contact information so that I can come to you and propose marriage? I'm not afraid of you laughing at me, but this is also my first time, so I'm a little nervous." Standing behind Yi Zichen, Wu Di's heart thumped wildly. The way he saw it, this woman in red was definitely a descendant of a major family clan in a high-ranking district. But this master of his acted as if he didn't know and flirted with him. Could it be that master didn't know that they were surrounded and that the situation wasn't optimistic? Several times Wu Di tried to warn his master, but no matter how he coughed or stamped his feet, his master ignored him. Of course, he had his suspicions. The woman had clearly ordered her subordinates to capture them from the very beginning. Why hadn't they come to capture them yet? "You're very interesting." To everyone's surprise, when she heard Yi Zichen's words, the woman in red laughed. She took a few steps closer to Yi Zichen, reached out and took the ruby ring from his hand. Yi Zichen didn't resist in the slightest. He simply let her take it. "I know you're secretly in love with me, but if you praise me so blatantly, I'll get arrogant." Humph! In an instant, the smile on the red-robed woman's face disappeared, and a piercingly cold wind whistled past. "What the hell are you doing? Hurry up and take him down." Only then did the 2 groups of people surrounding Yi Zichen and the others charge forward. The instant they moved, Wu Di unleashed the full power of a mid-stage entering immortal. However, his heart quickly grew cold. Human immortals! Even the weakest of the 2 groups was a human immortal. There were even sky immortal experts among them. Of course, this wasn't because Wu Di could see through their strength. Rather, the spiritual pressure they radiated made it impossible for him to resist at all. Based on this feeling, he guessed that they were definitely sky immortal experts. Behave yourself. In the blink of an eye, Wu Di's spiritual sea was sealed, and he was bound in chains. The chains were obviously a type of spiritual artifact. When they'd first taken them out, they'd only used a rope less than 10 centimeters long, but when they landed on Wu Di's body, they bound him tightly. This rope is rather similar to the Heavenly Court's immortal binding rope. Yi Zichen looked at the rope and couldn't help but mutter to himself. Perhaps it was actually immortal binding rope? It was just an ordinary treasure in the God realm, but in the lower realms it was an incredible treasure. Just as he was pondering whether or not this treasure was actually an immortal binding rope, he noticed that ropes had wrapped around his body as well. Furthermore, a wave of spiritual energy pressed down on his spiritual sea. Given his strength, the red-clothed woman's subordinates naturally had no way of sealing his spiritual sea. In order to cooperate, he had no choice but to voluntarily seal his spiritual sea. In truth, outsiders wouldn't notice anything amiss if he voluntarily sealed his spiritual sea. That was because he hadn't destroyed the spiritual energy sealing his spiritual sea at all. The only difference from being sealed was that he had the final say on when his spiritual sea would be unsealed. If he was going to put on an act, he had to go all the way. After voluntarily sealing his spiritual sea, Yi Zichen immediately feigned terror. "What are you doing? You just want to kidnap me and marry me? There's no need to seal my spiritual sea and tie me up like this. Could it be? Is this some sort of special hobby of yours?" Just a second ago, Yi Zichen was utterly terrified, but in the next, he'd reverted to his frivolous self. "Actually, I'm not particularly interested in being tied up or anything like that. But if you like it, I'll do as you please. Take him away." Even the red-clothed woman, who'd been pretending to be indifferent this entire time, shouted in exasperation. In the end, she was still a woman. How could she possibly disregard someone's frivolous words? "Miss, we don't have any extra horses on this trip," the red-clothed woman's subordinates answered cautiously. Only then did the woman remember that they'd left in a hurry and had a limited number of horses on hand. But this person was extremely important to her. Chapter 1048. Call me brother-in-law, go in. Yi Zichen and Wu Di were bundled up tightly. The woman in red shouted at them and shoved them into the carriage. The girl, who had been sitting in the carriage for a long time, immediately revealed a surprised look when she saw them. Yi Zichen pursed his lips and smiled when he saw her. "Sister-in-law, we meet again." Yi Zichen and the other's appearance clearly startled the little girl. She stared at them for a full half a minute, then put her hands on her hips and shouted, "What are you doing here? How dare you? Who allowed you to sit here?" Wu Di's but hadn't even stabilized yet. He glanced nervously at his master. His mood was particularly gloomy. He'd thought his master would have a way to escape, but to his surprise, he'd been tied up as well. This trip bodes ill rather than well. Of course, he absolutely didn't blame Yi Zichen. The way he saw it, although his master's personality was erratic, everything he did had a purpose. Since he had done that before, he naturally had his reasons. Moreover, he knew a little about his master's methods. Seeing that his master's expression was still as calm as before, perhaps there was still a chance to turn things around. Seeing that his master wasn't moving, Wu Di decided he might as well sit down as well. The girl's scolding had no effect on Yi Zichen at all. Yi Zichen couldn't help but sigh silently as he sat on the leather seat in enjoyment. Finally, they didn't have to travel on foot. "Hey, get off quickly. Who allowed you to get on the carriage?" The little girl pinched her waist and scolded him angrily. Yi Zichen wanted to reach out and rub her bun when he saw how cute she was, but then he remembered that he was already tied up by the immortal binding rope. Yi Zichen sighed helplessly, then hung his head dejectedly. It's all because of your sister. What's wrong with my sister? The little girl blinked and asked. Your sister wants to take me back to be her husband, Yi Zichen said angrily. Ai, girl, are your family bandits? I'm just a scholar who doesn't even have the strength to truss a chicken, yet you treat me like this. Even though I'm handsome, elegant, and have an extraordinary bearing, isn't it a little too much to kidnap me and make me the husband of the stronghold's ruler? I'm also a person who wants to save face. Nonsense. The little girl glared at him, put her hands on her hips, and snorted. The number of handsome men who want to woo my sister can line up from the northern Divine Mountain all the way to the southern Divine Mountain. You think she'll fall for you? You don't have the looks, and you don't have the morals. Also, you're obviously tied up with immortal binding chains, and your spiritual sea should be sealed as well. You're obviously a prisoner. Divine Mountain. The little girl obviously didn't have as many scruples as the adults when they spoke. She had previously mentioned the Divine Mountain. If it were an ordinary person, they might have only mentioned the greater district. But she mentioned the Divine Mountain. Could it be that they were people from the Divine Mountain? Yi Zichen chuckled and set his thoughts aside, then shrugged helplessly. Then why do you think I'm in your car now? Since the little girl didn't believe him, Yi Zichen had no choice but to push the question back. You said my spiritual sea was sealed and I was tied up with immortal binding chains, so I'm a prisoner. But why would a prisoner like me suddenly appear in a young lady's carriage? Doesn't that make no sense? The little girl put her hands on her hips, and her aura weakened somewhat. This lecher was right. If he really was a prisoner, he shouldn't have gotten into her carriage. Yet her big sister let him in. Could it be? As she considered this, the little girl's pupils dilated uncontrollably. No way. My family introduced so many promising young elites to my big sister, but she didn't even look them in the eye. Could it be that she really took a fancy to this lecher? When he saw that the little girl's gaze had wavered, Yi Zichen hurriedly took advantage of the situation. You're still young. You don't understand much about men and women. When it comes to relationships, there's actually another way to describe it. Love at first sight. Your sister's feelings for me fall into the latter category. From the moment she laid eyes on me, I saw an emotion in her eyes. What emotion? Asked the little girl. Desire. Yi Zichen's gaze was sincere, as if he were telling the truth. It's the light of desire emanating from the depths of her heart. She wanted me, no matter the cost. Given my current situation, it's obvious she succeeded. But my family won't agree. By now, the little girl was already 70 to 80% convinced. Yi Zichen's portrayal of his emotions and expression was just too perfect, so much so that she actually somewhat believed him. However, there was no way her family would allow him to be with her big sister. Family? In the face of love at first sight, what's a family? In the face of desire and desire, family is bullshit. Yi Zichen rambled excitedly. Right now, he was bound and unable to move. Otherwise, he absolutely could have put on an even more convincing performance. Besides, think about your big sister's personality. Since she tied me up and became my husband, is she really the type of person to easily obey her family's arrangements? No. If her big sister really was the type of person to obey her family's arrangements, she would have been married off long ago. It was precisely because she was so strong that her family couldn't restrict her that she'd remained single for so long. The more the little girl thought about it, the more she couldn't believe it. Could it be that her big sister really? That's impossible. If I tell you all this now, it might be hard for you to understand. Once you grow up a bit, you'll understand. Yi Zichen sighed dejectedly. I'm afraid I'll end up in your big sister's hands for the rest of my life. What's wrong with my big sister? There are plenty of people who want to pursue her. Even if she tied you up and made you her husband without your consent, that's still your honor. Is that so? Yi Zichen's eyes sparkled, then he laughed. So you believe me now? What's your name? Shwebebe. Alright, Lil Bei. My name is Yi Zichen. Shouldn't you call me brother-in-law now? Shue Beibei's expression was clearly hesitant, but after mulling it over for a moment, she realized that this lecher's words really did make some sense. Brother-in-law. As soon as he said that, Yi Zichen's heart leapt with delight. Wu Di sat beside him. His admiration for his master had long since soared to the highest heavens. His master was truly a godly figure. However, as soon as Shue Beibei called out brother-in-law, someone opened the carriage's curtains. The woman in red's chest heaved up and down violently. Her delicate face was frosty as she stared fixedly at Shue Beibei. Chapter 1049. You seem to have gotten something wrong. If it weren't for the fact that this was her little sister, the woman in red might have blown up the entire carriage. Earlier, she'd ridden her ghost horse, sealed his spiritual sea, and bound him with immortal restraining chains. The way she saw it, Yi Zichen posed no threat at all. However, she'd been worried that Yi Zichen would run his mouth in the carriage, so she'd dismounted and boarded. She hadn't expected her little sister to give her such a pleasant surprise as soon as she got on the carriage. Brother-in-law? Big sister. Sensing the woman in red's fury, Shue Beibei, who'd been about to approach, bit her lip and smiled foolishly. However, she didn't budge. Honey, don't scare our little sister, scolded Yi Zichen. Yi Zichen scolded him, then looked at Shue Beibei as if he really were her brother-in-law. Sister-in-law, don't be afraid. Brother-in-law will protect you. If your sister dares do anything to you, I won't sleep with her tonight. Let's see if she'll fret or not. Instantly, the temperature in the carriage plummeted below zero. The woman in red stood in front of the carriage door, her face wreathed in undisguised fury. Her murderous aura threatened to tear the heavens apart. Boundless spiritual pressure radiated from her body. Yi Zichen couldn't help but arch his brows when he sensed it. A peak sky immortal. Judging from the density of her spiritual energy, she was probably only a step away from becoming an immortal king. This spiritual pressure targeted only Yi Zichen, so Wu Di and Shue Beibei didn't feel any discomfort at all. If you really want to die, I can help you. The woman in red's voice seemed to rise from the depths of hell. Just hearing her tone was enough to make anyone shiver involuntarily. It seemed she was truly angry. Yi Zichen thought about it for a moment and decided it was best not to provoke her further. Fine, fine, fine. I won't say anything then. I know you're thin-skinned, but there's no outsider here, right? When he saw that the woman in red was about to erupt like a volcano, Yi Zichen licked his lips and hurriedly admitted defeat. Fine, I was wrong. Spare me, heroine. After ruining her chastity like this, the woman in red was truly intent on killing him. Even though Yi Zichen was begging for mercy, she continued to stare coldly at him. Yi Zichen was truly afraid she'd do something stupid. All he could do was look at Shue Beibei pleadingly. Shue Beibei was furious. From the look on her sister's face, she knew she'd been tricked by that lecher. However, in the end, it was her own stupidity that made her sister so angry. After thinking for a while, she licked her lips and cautiously moved closer. Sis, don't be angry. Beibei knows his mistake. She pouted pitifully, her big eyes filled with grievance and regret. The red-clothed woman rubbed Shue Beibei's head helplessly. You still know you're wrong? Although these words seemed to be reprimanding her, her doting eyes betrayed her true thoughts. Sure enough, Shue Beibei's pitiful attack immediately defeated the woman in red. All right, I won't blame you. Big sister is the best. Shue Beibei kissed the woman in red on the cheek. The woman in red rubbed Shue Beibei's head affectionately, then turned to Yi Zichen with a cold gaze and snorted. For my little sister's sake, I'll spare your life, but don't think for a second that you're truly safe. You'd best tell me everything you know, otherwise. In truth, the woman in red hadn't originally intended to kill Yi Zichen. After all, Yi Zichen was extremely important to her. She'd never caught any of the black-robed men who'd robbed her merchant association of their resources. Either they couldn't catch them, or if they did, they killed themselves. That way, they wouldn't be able to find any valuable clues. Yizichin was the first person they'd caught yet still hadn't died. She had to get some useful information out of him. Speak, who sent you here? The woman in red sat down across from Yizichin, her gaze icy. What did you say? When he heard her question, Yizichin was dumbfounded. What do you mean, who sent us? We, master and disciple, sent ourselves? Bang! She viciously slapped the cushion next to her, startling Wu Di. Her aura surged, and the woman in red's aura surged. Don't try to play dumb with me. I advise you to hurry up and confess everything you know. Otherwise, once we get to Raging Flame City, I have 10,000 ways to make you wish you were dead and force you to spill the beans. What the hell are you talking about? Yizichin furrowed his brows. You're a fine girl. Why do you seem a little mentally disturbed? What nonsense are you spouting? I'm your benefactor. If you don't repay me with your body, that's one thing, but now you're actually interrogating me? Still pretending? You won't shed a tear until you see your coffin, huh? As she spoke, the woman in red smiled coldly and took out a ring. It was none other than the ruby-encrusted ring Yizichin had picked up. Then why don't you tell me why this ring is in your hands? I picked it up. Yizichin answered truthfully. Picked it up? The woman in red acted as if she'd just heard the funniest joke in the world. She slipped the ring onto her ring finger, cocked her head, and laughed. Do you know how much this ring is worth? There are at least 100 million worth of pills, talismans, and precious artifacts in there. You're telling me you picked it up? You really are a lucky bastard. My luck is indeed pretty good. Yizichin replied. Bang. Impudent. Her palm slammed heavily on the leather seat next to her. This time, when she took her hand away, there was a charred handprint on the leather seat. This ring belongs to the Skyspan Trading Company, yet you say you picked it up? Tell me, what's your relationship with those black-robed men? Who's your mastermind? Tell me the truth. Wu Di had long since sensed that these people were no ordinary people, but he never would have guessed they had such a powerful background. The Skyspan Trading Company. They were the largest auction house in the northern Divine Mountains' 72 districts. Practically every district had at least 3 of their auction houses. From the spiritual pills and magical artifacts needed by immortal kings to the ordinary weapons and body-tempering pills for body tempering, the Skyspan Trading Company could satisfy them all. Rumor had it that the Skyspan Trading Company wasn't just active in the northern Divine Mountains' 72 districts, they were active in the other lower lands as well. Rumor had it that they were active in the Yao realm as well. Wu Di's Adam's apple bobbed up and down uncontrollably. By now, he was at a complete loss for what to do. However, Yizichin just smiled calmly. He looked at the woman's protruding breasts and gulped. Then, his expression turned serious. Chapter 1050. Girl, I'm your benefactor. No matter how overbearing the woman in red was, or how powerful the Skyspan Trading Company's background was, Yizichin didn't care. Yizichin didn't seem to mind. Instead, he smiled inexplicably. Do you think I'm one of those bandits who stole your Skyspan Trading Company's resources? Yizichin's aura had changed, and he radiated an aura of righteousness. This change startled the woman in red, but she still nodded noncommittally. That's right. All right, then I'd like to ask you a few questions. If you can answer them, I'll tell you everything I know. Go ahead. The woman in red smiled calmly. Yizichin's transformation had only affected her for an instant. The way she saw it, Yizichin was one of those black-robed men's accomplices. She wanted to see what he had to say. When was your Skyspan Trading Company robbed? A week ago. Did they rob you before? Yes. Then did you capture any of them? Yes. Did they leave any survivors? No. What I've asked you is the truth. Yes. Their conversation was short and to the point. After asking these questions, Yizichin nodded in satisfaction and stopped asking questions. His eyes lit up with a faint smile. Very good. If everything you say is the truth, then everything will be easy to handle. I'd like to hear the details. The woman in red gestured for Yizichin to begin, then sat cross-legged on a leather cushion and quietly waited for him to perform. As for my identity, I have 3 ways to prove myself. First, my apprentice and I are innocent. My name is Yizichin, and my apprentice is Wu Di of Raging Flame City's Wu family. We left Black Ox Town 4 days ago and hurried to Raging Flame City. We've been in Black Ox Town this entire time, which doesn't match the time you were robbed. If you don't believe me, you can go to Black Ox Town and investigate. I trust that with your extraordinary abilities, you'll definitely get to the bottom of this. Secondly, you said that they tried to rob you before, but they didn't leave any survivors. In that case, it's obvious that they're a disciplined group. In order to prevent you from catching them, they committed suicide. It's even more likely that someone controlling them from behind the scenes used some sort of method to kill them. Don't say that's impossible. I'm sure you know about soul chains. So here's the problem. If I'm a member of that organization, why didn't I commit suicide and why am I still alive? Third, let's say I'm a member of that organization and successfully obtained your ring. Would I foolishly stand there and wait for you to come over and let you take the ring back effortlessly? Do you think I's brain isn't enough? Or do you think that I've found my conscience and want to turn myself in and start anew? This is my answer to prove our innocence. Please begin your performance. Big breasts but no brains was precisely what the red-clothed woman meant. Anyone could understand such a simple principle, but she'd never thought of it. She'd even had Yizichin explain it to her. Editor, Ishi Master, she's more had than she d. If she could could have thought. Yi was, tu Yi was the long master. She Yi T sect, heart, 2 centers, Yi the she the. Although she didn't want to admit it, she had to admit that Yizichin's words made sense. As for what happened in Black Ox Town, she'd naturally send people to investigate. However, after hearing Yizichin's explanation, she was somewhat certain he wasn't working with the black-clothed men. It hadn't been easy for her to make a breakthrough, but this was the result. It was a bit of a pity, wasn't it? Wu Di and Shwebebe looked at Yizichin strangely. Their master really was brilliant. With just a few words, he'd cleared up all their doubts. As for Shwebebe, she felt like this lecher was a completely different person. Then can you explain? You said you picked up the ring, but I still find it hard to believe. It was clear that Yizichin's words had already taken effect. The woman's tone was no longer as sharp as before. Yizichin pressed his lips into a smile, then reverted to his former lecherous self. That's why I said I'm your benefactor. Before the woman in red could say anything, Yizichin crossed his legs and leaned back against the carriage in satisfaction. In truth, there are some things I didn't want to say. I was just worried you'd fall in love with me. But since you kept pressing me for answers, I had no choice but to tell you. In truth, my apprentice and I were resting when we happened to see a few strange-looking black-clothed men appear. My sharp intuition told me that they were definitely up to no good. Seeing that they were about to pass by us, in the blink of an eye, I swept my leg and knocked one of the men in black to the ground. Then, I used Dragon's bind hand. Perhaps he really had gone overboard with his acting. In order to make his words even more vivid, Yizichin even added some action. Especially when he said his last move. His hand broke free of the immortal binding chains and directly clasped onto the woman in red's most important part. Instantly, the entire world seemed to come to a standstill. Wu Di gaped at him in astonishment. Shwebebe covered her mouth and stared wide-eyed at him. As for the woman in red, it was as if someone had cast a body-freezing spell on her. She froze in place. Cough, cough. Yizichin realized that he'd gone a bit overboard. He hurriedly retracted his hands, then scratched his head and coughed dryly. In short, I subdued that person and snatched the ring from him. Then I ran into you, and then I took the ring. The more Yizichin went on, the less confident he became. He could already sense the woman's gaze, ready to tear him to shreds. Yizichin gulped, then waved his hands in front of him and smiled bitterly. Hey, don't get so worked up, girl. I can swear on my honor that I really didn't do it on purpose. Let's just pretend it never happened. Hey, don't move. Girl, why are you grabbing a knife? I'm your benefactor. Hey, why did you pull out an axe? Girl, we're living in a harmonious society. We can't do this. Killing people is against the law. You're still young, so you absolutely can't do anything stupid. Hey, what are you doing? I'm your benefactor. Why are you walking over to me with a knife and axe? I'm your benefactor, girl. Don't get so worked up. I'm your benefactor. Chapter 1051. This was the union of love-raging Flame City. The mortal Great District's 13 main districts were as large as 10 Black Ox towns, with more than enough space to spare. Practically all of the mortal Great District's high officials, dignitaries, and people of high status lived here. Rumor had it that after the Great War of Gods and Demons, the God race had redrawn their territory. At that time, Raging Flame City was ablaze with raging flames. Even supreme experts found it difficult to approach. The far north divine region's divine mountain poured unruly seawater down to extinguish the flames. In order to commemorate the Great War of Gods and Demons, as well as to ensure that the people of the God realm wouldn't easily forget the terrible losses of the past, the divine mountain bestowed the city with the name Raging Flame. Moreover, the city was heavily nurtured by the divine mountain. As a result, it became one of the most iconic cities in the mortal Great District. The city's long history allowed countless clans to use it as their foundation and flourish to this day. As a result, the city's prosperity rivaled that of the profound Great District's main city. However, due to the district's rank, it was still a mortal city. It was worth mentioning the city's 3 great clans and a few other factions. The Liu family in the south had existed since the city's birth. They were one of the oldest clans in Raging Flame City. Outsiders had no way of knowing whether or not the Liu family had any sky immortal experts, but no one dared to say that such an ancient family didn't have any. As a result, very few people in the mortal and profound Great Districts dared to provoke the Liu family's dignity. The head of the Wang family in the east was the current city lord of Raging Flame City. He was a sky immortal expert and controlled a considerable amount of the city's resources. The last family was the Wu family in the north, which was also Wudi's family. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they'd been the top aristocratic family 100 years ago, but a dozen or so years ago, their ancestor had passed away. The clan hadn't produced a single sky immortal in the past decade. The strongest members were the clan's elders, who were peak human immortals. That kind of power was a great deterrent to outsiders, but it wasn't enough to be one of the 3 great clans. The Axe Gang in the west was also eyeing them like a tiger watching its prey. The Wu family was in an awkward situation. If they didn't produce any more sky immortals, they would probably be removed from the 3 great clans. However, in reality, none of these clans were the true hegemons of Raging Flame City. The few clans that truly transcended the other clans of Raging Flame City were the Skyspan Trading Company, located in the center of the city. Outside a manor belonging to the Skyspan Trading Company, the red-clothed woman's caravan had already reached the interior of the manor. The people in the caravan also went to do what they needed to do. A middle-aged man of average height approached Shui Beibei's carriage. Although he looked ordinary, he was the only expert in the full-circle heavenly immortal stage in the team. His mission this time was not to escort the auction items, but to ensure the safety of these 2 young ladies. First miss, third miss, we've arrived at Raging Flame City. The middle-aged man stood outside the car door and called out softly, but no one came out of the car for a long time. Suddenly, he remembered that there were 2 people in the carriage that he suspected to be the black-clothed man's accomplices. He did not care about the complicated etiquette and abruptly lifted the curtain of the carriage. In that instant, he was stunned. Inside the carriage, the red-clothed woman sat on Yizichen's back. From behind, he couldn't see what they were doing. All he could see was that their postures were intimate. Shwebebe was clearly frightened. She shivered in a corner of the carriage, holding on to Wu Di, who'd been bound by the immortal binding shackles. It was as if the scene in front of her was unbearable. However, she peeked her head out through a crack in the window to see what was going on. Hiss. Hey. Stop. Yizichin let out a series of strange cries. The elder's face instantly turned ashen. First miss. The dignified roar was like a clap of thunder. Shwebebe pushed Wu Di to the side and ran to the elder's side. The elder's thunderous roar startled the red-clothed woman on Yizichen's back. When she turned around, she saw the peak sky immortal expert's face ashen. She could vaguely make out the veins on his neck, and his hand was pressed against Shwebebe's eyes. Elder Che, what's going on? The red-clothed woman clearly hadn't thought too much about it. She'd only asked because she saw the elder's grave expression. To her surprise, the elder's face darkened and he roared, "The third young miss isn't even of age yet you let her see something so unbearably filthy. First miss, do you know shame?" This shout caused the people in the caravan, who had already dispersed, to turn around and secretly look at the situation over here. "Grand Elder, what do you mean by that? Just what did I let my little sister see that's so unbearably filthy?" The scene just now was, at most, a bit violent. However, when her little sister was in the manor, she'd watched the guards compete in martial arts. It was far more violent than the scene she'd created. Who said it wasn't? This is a union of love. How could you say something so unbearably filthy? At that moment, Yizichin, who was in the car, retorted. Although the third young miss is young, she's on the verge of becoming an adult. There are some things she'll have to experience sooner or later. As her older sister and brother-in-law, we're just giving her a lesson in advance so that she'll have some confidence when she faces it in the future. It's all because of our love for Bebe. Yizichin's words were clear and logical. Furthermore, he didn't even get up. The carriage's curtains blocked his view. Elder Che was clearly furious when he saw the red-clothed woman's disheveled clothes. "You're on your own." After glaring viciously at the woman in red, the elder grabbed Shwebebe's hand and left the carriage. If she still couldn't react at this point, the red-clothed woman really was retarded. She furrowed her brows and hurriedly covered Yizichin's mouth with her hand, but she remained seated on his lap. She tilted her head and bit her lip. "Elder Che, it's not what he said. Please, let me explain." Her words didn't stop the elder in the slightest. When the onlooking attendants saw the elder leave, they hurriedly returned to their work. However, every now and then, they glanced at the red-clothed woman, then back at the carriage. Their expressions were strange. "This is going to be interesting. The young miss of the Skyspan Trading Company is actually in someone else's carriage. Hehehe. Hey, can your subordinates keep their mouths shut? This can't get out. If it makes the headlines in Raging Flame City, my reputation will be ruined. I'm a very thin-skinned person. I don't want people gossiping about me." Yizichin lay back in the carriage and snorted. This was his revenge. He was this woman's benefactor. Back then, he'd merely acted a little too aggressively, so he'd grabbed her by her private parts. So what? Even if he grabbed her, he couldn't lose a single piece of flesh. If she really felt like she'd suffered a loss, Yizichin felt like he could have just let her grab him. He wasn't that petty of a person. But this woman was different. She'd beaten him up without saying a word. She'd completely disregarded the fact that he was her benefactor. A good man doesn't fight a woman, so he didn't retaliate the entire time. But was he the type to suffer a loss? Of course not. "You hit me? That's fine. I'll just get it back from somewhere else." Just now, he hadn't bothered to lower his voice in the slightest. He was sure that the woman's attendants had heard him. If he was right, the woman's attendants had countless versions of what he'd just said. But not a single one of them was the proper version. The young miss of the Skyspan Trading Company had fallen in love with an unfamiliar man at first sight. The two of them had sex in the carriage, putting on a live erotic show for the third miss. Yizichin didn't care. He was thick-skinned. He didn't care. It was just that unreasonable woman. How would people criticize her in the future? Just thinking about it excited him. Just as Yizichin was feeling pleased with his plan, he sensed a cold light shooting towards him. In the blink of an eye. Spare me, heroine. Chapter 1052. Don't think I can't bear to part with you. In a woodshed in the Skyspan Trading Company's residence, Yizichin, who just escaped the immortal binding chains, obediently allowed himself to be bound tightly again. His face was covered in bruises, and he looked particularly wretched. The woman in red grabbed one end of the rope, dragged Yizichin over to the woodshed, and kicked him inside. Just stay in there and wait. Is this how you treat your benefactor? Yizichin fell to the ground and cursed angrily. This woman was absolutely an ingrate. He'd helped her out so much, yet she wasn't even the slightest bit grateful. Instead, she sneered at her benefactor and beat him up. No matter how he thought about it, he couldn't hold back his anger. All he could do was try to maintain his composure. Little did he know, if it weren't for the fact that he'd returned the ring, she might have beaten him half to death long ago. It seems you haven't had enough? From the moment they'd met, Yizichin had said flirtatious things. On the way to the carriage, he'd even put his hand on her. She'd never had a man put his hand on her before. Especially since he'd said those things on purpose just now, causing Elder Che and the other attendants to misunderstand. Based on that alone, it wouldn't be unreasonable for the woman in red to sentence Yizichin to death. Sending him to the woodshed was already an act of mercy. When he saw that the woman was about to raise her hand again, Yizichin hurriedly gave in. Spare me, heroine. When she saw that Yizichin seemed to be bowing to her, she lowered her hand, rolled her eyes at him, and turned to leave. Heroine, please wait. When he saw that she was about to leave, Yizichin hurriedly called out to her. What do you want now? Whenever she saw Yizichin, she was infuriated. She reluctantly turned her head away. Her delicate brows knit together, and her delicate cheeks were frosty. From the look of things, it seemed she'd attack him at the slightest provocation. When he sensed her gaze, Yizichin shrunk back and laughed dryly, then pointed at his apprentice with his chin. My disciple is a member of Raging Flame City's Wu family. The clan competition is in a few days, so it's pretty important to him. Heroine, please understand that the two of us are not comrades of that group of black-clothed men. I know that I have made things difficult for Heroine along the way, but my disciple has always been quite well behaved. How about this? Let my disciple return to the clan, and I'll stay here. Master, disciple will not leave. As soon as Yizichin finished speaking, Wu Di, who was in the woodshed with him, spoke up. What are you doing here? Are you an idiot? I've painstakingly trained you to become what you are now. Isn't it all so that you can ruthlessly slap those fellows' faces in the clan's internal competition? Have you forgotten your obsession? Don't you want to amaze the world with a single brilliant feat in the clan grand competition? Yizichin scolded Wu Di until he was completely speechless. Only then did he smile apologetically at the woman in red. Heroine, what do you think? These two really weren't the black-clothed men's comrades. In truth, the woman in red was the one who'd captured them wrongly. Even if she kept them here, she wouldn't be able to get any information out of them. Besides, she only held a grudge against Yizichin. She wouldn't go so far as to direct her anger at Wu Di. Servants! He shouted towards the outside of the woodshed. Not long after, an attendant from the caravan appeared in front of the woodshed. Young Mississippi, unseal young Master Wu's immortal binding chains and spiritual sea. Send him back to Raging Flame City's Wu family. Understood. The attendant gestured for Wu Di to leave the woodshed. Wu Di stared worriedly at Yi Zichen, who sat in the woodshed. He didn't budge for a long time. Let's go. I absolutely won't be in any danger. Hurry back to the clan. You absolutely can't delay the clan's competition. When he saw Yi Zichen's warm smile, Wu Di gnashed his teeth, bowed deeply, and left the woodshed. After Wu Di left, the woman in red crossed her arms and shook her head. I never would have guessed such a well-mannered young man was the apprentice of someone like you. Yi Zichen couldn't help but chuckle. What's wrong with me? Can't you sense my overwhelming righteous aura? As he spoke, Yi Zichen intentionally puffed out his chest. I haven't seen your overwhelming righteous aura, but I've experienced your ruffian aura. Just stay here and enjoy yourself. I hope you'll still be alive the next time I come. As he left the woodshed, Yi Zichen called out once more. Wait a moment. What is it now? The woman in red turned around, and as she did so, her two large mountains rested on her arms. Yi Zichen's words were forced back by the beautiful scenery. He gulped repeatedly. When she sensed his gaze, the woman in red's face instantly turned ashen. A heavy pressure instantly erupted from her body. It looks like you don't need your eyes anymore. Hey. Don't. Why are you so hot-tempered? Do you think you'll lose a single piece of meat if I look at you? Besides, I'm a normal man. Why wouldn't I look when there's a benefit? Yi Zichen's tone was matter-of-fact, but it only made the woman's fury rise. Shut up. Her tone was extremely threatening, and the ground beneath her feet began to crack under the release of her spiritual power. This woman really had a temper. Everyone said she was vicious and evil, but she had the ability to back it up. How could she still have such a temper? Yi Zichen pursed his lips in disdain, then said helplessly, Fine, don't get angry. If you get angry, your hormones will go haywire and you'll go through menopause early. If this woman wants to maintain her youthful looks, it's best if she stays calm. Little sister, you're a Leo, aren't you? You seem a bit domineering. I can't be bothered with you. The woman in red stomped her foot in anger. She gnashed her teeth and turned to leave. Wait a moment. Don't think I really can't bear to kill you. She just stepped out of the woodshed when she came to a stop. Then, she took a vicious step towards the woodshed. Her aura instantly surged to its peak. She really was about to explode from anger. She never would have guessed she'd run into this scoundrel. Yi Zichen, however, paid no heed to her spiritual pressure. His eyes flashed a subtle smile, and his expression was slightly bashful. You've said what's on your mind, haven't you? You can't bear to. Haha. Let me catch you. Like I said, when you looked at me, it was like your eyes were filled with love at first sight. You wanted to hide it, but now you can't hide it anymore. His playful tone was about to drive the red-clothed woman crazy. However, just as her anger was about to reach its peak, she stopped. You can't pay attention to someone like her. She's just trying to take advantage of you. Just ignore her. Shuehonghong, you have to hold it in. You absolutely have to hold it in. This guy's mouth is a bit cheap, but he's not a bad person. You have to suppress the fire in your heart. You can't really do anything to him. Shuehonghong was the woman in red's real name. She'd almost lost her head in anger. In her heart, she repeatedly told herself to endure, to hold it in. But, hey little sister, I still don't know your name. I don't. She no longer needed to see Yi Zichen's annoying face. All she had to do was hear him speak, and it was like adding fuel to the fire. It burned hotter and hotter. She had to get out of here. Shuehonghong didn't hesitate. She turned and left the woodshed. She'd already decided that no matter how much Yi Zichen called out to her, she wouldn't look back. But, little sister, don't hold back your feelings. I'll leave the door open for you tonight. Chapter 1053. I'm your son-in-law. Shuehonghong stood in front of the woodshed, her chest heaving. She could swear, even swear, that in all her life she'd never seen someone with such a nasty mouth. At first, she just wanted to punish Yi Zichen a little, lock him up for a few days, then let him go. But now she'd changed her mind. She'd lock him up until he died. During this time in Raging Flame City, he'd never be able to leave the woodshed. Once she returned to the clan, she'd take Yizichin with her and seal his freedom for the rest of his life. Fortunately, Yizichin didn't hear her. If he did, he'd definitely say, "What are you taking me back for? To get married? Do you want to use your fiery passion to bind me for the rest of my life? Sorry, I'm a wanton person who loves freedom. Your love. I refuse. From now on, no one is allowed to pay any attention to the people in the woodshed. No matter what they say inside, you're not allowed to interfere. Do you all hear me?" There were quite a few servants standing in front of the woodshed. Shui Hong Hong glowered at them and gnashed her teeth as she cursed. "Yes, sir." The servants couldn't help but nod. However, when they saw the young lady's disheveled clothes, and the rumors circulating in the det court, could it be that the young master inside refused to obey, so the young lady wanted to turn him into her exclusive property? She usually seemed quite nice, but they'd never guessed she was this sort of person. Shui Hong Hong no longer cared about what others thought. All she wanted to do was lock him up. Just stay in there. Don't even think about coming out for the rest of your life. In truth, Shui Hong Hong's original intention was to vent her anger, but to outsiders, it seemed more like a couple throwing a tantrum. She flung her arms and left the woodshed. By now, the bruises on his face had long since disappeared, and he'd broken free of the ropes binding him. Yizichin scanned the area with his immortal awareness, but the woman in red had already disappeared. He smirked, then poked his head out of the woodshed. "Hey, you guys." When the servants saw Yizichin open the door, they were astonished. Then they heard Yizichin say, "Hey, hurry up and bring me some meat. Hurry up and give me some meat. I'm starving to death." Actually, one could abstain from eating after becoming an immortal, but Yizichin was someone from the modern realm. Even though he was incredibly strong, he still craved those few bites of meat. The servants outside the door were very hesitant. Eldest Miss had already explicitly forbidden them from interfering with the people inside. "What are you standing there for? Don't you dare to go find meat for me? I am your family's future son-in-law. That bitch said that she was going to lock me up. Can't you tell that she was just saying it out of anger? If you really starve me, I'm sure that you won't have a good time." As soon as these words came out, the expressions of the servants outside the door loosened a little. When they thought about what the eldest miss had said just now, it did seem a little like she was flirting. Please wait a moment. Regardless of whether the truth was what they thought, they were just servants. They really didn't dare to take this risk. That's more like it. Hurry up. After about 7 or 8 minutes, the servants delivered several dishes of meat to Yizichin. Yizichin closed the door to the woodshed, then laid back down with a look of satisfaction. In truth, this woodshed was pretty good. With the licorice here, he felt particularly uncomfortable lying down. Although the environment wasn't all that great, it was secluded and quiet. I wonder how my dear disciple is doing, but with people from the Skyspan Trading Company escorting him, I don't think he'll run into any danger. Furthermore, that bitch called him Young Master Wu, so when they get to the Wu family, they'll definitely call him Young Master Wu as well. That way, even if the Wu family has designs on my disciple, they'll definitely be wary of him and won't dare do anything to him. Everything was just as Yizichin thought. When the Wu family saw Wu Di and the people from the Skyspan Trading Company, they were terrified, but their attitude towards Wu Di also improved considerably. Even with Wu Di's awkward status within the clan, he was still assigned a courtyard. This courtyard just so happened to be right next to Jing Yunan's courtyard. Of course, Jing Yunan was the only person he could get along with in the entire clan. Within a luxurious room stood a dozen or so black-robed men. In front of them sat a particularly acerbic and unkind woman, as well as a burly man with a buzz cut and sunken eyes. "Gang leader Huang, this is your promise to me." "Madam, please calm down. The man on the sofa tried to comfort her, but the acerbic woman's eyes widened so much they looked like they were about to pop out of their sockets. Who was it that patted their chest and said there was no way Wu Di would make it into the city alive? Who was that just now? Was it a ghost? Madam, if what Deacon Lee said was true and they walked on the ancient path, then he definitely wouldn't be able to escape from our trap. But these past few days, aside from the Skyspan Trading Company's caravan, there's no one else. Also, as you can see, he was sent here by the Heavenspan Upper Association. Do you want us to attack the Heavenspan Upper Association? Humph. The acerbic woman snorted coldly. This woman was none other than the wife of the Wu family's patriarch, the second miss of the Li family, Li Na. A few days ago, she'd learned from Li Wanlong that Wu Di's master was an expert. She'd already been furious. Coincidentally, Li Wanlong had sent her a message saying that they'd taken the ancient path to Raging Flame City. In order to avoid any more trouble, Li Na had hardened her heart and recruited the Axe Gang to kill Wu Di and his master. She never would have guessed that the little bastard had connections with the Skyspan Trading Company. Madam, don't worry. Our Axe Gang has a deep-seated grudge with Wu Di and his master. Just because we failed this time doesn't mean that we will give up. Skysplit Tower is indeed powerful, but a strong dragon cannot suppress a snake in its own territory. Even if they have the support of Skysplit Tower, our Axe Gang will still exterminate that master and disciple. The person who spoke was none other than the leader of the Axe Gang, Huang Aogu. His tone was extremely sinister. Not long ago, he had received a report from his most beloved subordinate, Zhao Yi. Coincidentally, Li Na had come looking for him for this mission, so he had accepted it. In order to ambush and kill Wu Di and his master, he'd set up an inescapable net, but the Skyspan Trading Company had foiled his plans. Madam, please give us a little more time. We'll definitely make Wu Di and his master disappear from this world. I hope so. With a sinister snort, Li Na rose from the sofa. Huang Aogu wanted to see her off, but she refused. Gang leader Huang, please wait a moment. She'd come looking for the Axe Gang on a mission of her own volition. Besides, the Wu family's relationship with the Axe Gang was rather tense. If others saw this, it wouldn't be good for her. Li Na walked indifferently out of the room, her eyes flashing with a sinister, chilling light. Chapter 1054. A fire in the backyard. When Jing Yunan learned that Wu Di had returned to the clan, she'd been preparing to enter seclusion and consolidate her cultivation before the clan's grand competition. However, she gave up on that thought and ran to Wu Di's residence. With the Skyspan Trading Company present, the Wu family didn't dare slight Wu Di in the slightest. Whether in terms of feng shui or decorations, the residence they'd assigned him was exquisite. How come I don't see that senior with you? Jing Yunan asked from her seat in front of a lotus pond. That senior had left a deep impression on her. Master, he's busy with other matters. Wu Di naturally couldn't tell her that his master was currently being held captive by the Skyspan Trading Company. All he could do was make up an excuse and brush the topic aside. See? You're already calling that senior master. I told you he wanted to take you as his disciple. Jing Yunan smiled sweetly. When she saw that Wu Di had found a good teacher, she was genuinely happy for him. Let me tell you a secret you don't know about. I heard it from my grandfather. Raging Flame City changes city lords every 100 years, right? The Wang family's current city lord has been in office for almost 100 years. In a few days, I heard that the other two clans will be sending people over to exchange pointers during the clan's grand competition. In truth, it's all for the sake of seeing the younger generation's abilities. That way, they'll decide which clan will be the next city lord. Really? There was a lot of information in this piece of information. The decision to choose the next city lord had been made by the younger generation. This overturned thousands of years of tradition. Wu Di's eyes were filled with shock. Jing Yunan nodded confidently. My grandfather probably wouldn't lie to me. When the time comes, the other two clans will send their elite. If you can make a name for yourself in the competition, our clan's opinion of you will definitely change. Wu Di, don't overthink things. I'm not. In truth, Zheng Yunan just wanted to encourage Wu Di to do his best during the competition. However, when she saw the change in his expression, she tried to explain, only to discover that she didn't quite understand. It's fine. I don't mind. When he saw her flustered expression, Wu Di smiled and waved his hand. In the entire clan, only she and her grandfather were kinder to him. He knew Zheng Yunan meant well. How could he possibly resent her? If it was a few days ago, I might have cared about the opinions of my family members, but now they can look at me however they want. As long as Master doesn't despise me, that's enough. As for this clan, is it still considered a home to me? For example, if the Skyspan Trading Company hadn't escorted him back to his clan, he was certain that he wouldn't have been able to survive. If that attendant hadn't called him young Master Wu, the clan definitely wouldn't have assigned him this residence, even if he was the son of the clan leader. The strong were respected, and if he wanted to gain enough respect, he had to make himself strong enough. Right now, all he cared about was his own strength. As for what others thought of him, aside from his master, Yi Zichen, he didn't care. Actually, Zheng Yunan looked as if she wanted to console him, but Wu Di cut her off. That's enough. Can you sit here with me for a while? With that, Wu Di lay down stiffly. He gazed up at the fiery clouds in the sky, illuminated by the setting sun. He couldn't help but mutter to himself, I wonder how Master is doing. There was no need to worry about Yi Zichen at all. His master was probably living a better life than anyone else. He'd finished all the plates of beef the servants had brought him, and there were many jugs of immortal brew scattered around him. Some were still dripping wine. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, Yi Zichen lay down on his straw mat and fell into a deep sleep. I said, let's have fire. Yi Zichen muttered to himself in his sleep. His hands subconsciously rose, and he crossed them in a series of hand seals. Whoosh! A flame suddenly appeared in his palms. It was completely white, and it flickered in the wind like will-o'-the-wisp. Blaze of fire. Yi Zichen muttered the same words he'd heard in his sleep. Then, as if he'd just added some incredible fuel to the flames, they rose 1/2 meter into the air. The light of the flames penetrated his eyelids and shone into his eyes, making him see a ball of fire in his sleep. However, he was in no mood to pay attention to it. In his dream, in his sea of consciousness, he waved his right hand and pushed the flames away. At the same time, he threw the flame in his right hand towards the pile of firewood in the firewood room. Whoosh! The flames raged. Night had fallen. The people who'd gone after the black-robed men had returned. Shui Honghong sat in the front hall and frowned at the people inside. How did it go? Did you find the lost auction items? We did. One of the attendants handed over 2 storage rings. Shui Honghong accepted the rings, then scanned them with her immortal awareness. When she discovered that nothing was missing, she sighed in relief. Then she asked, Did you catch them? In truth, she was just asking casually. They'd already clashed with the black-robed men countless times, but they'd never caught any of them alive. As expected, the people in the hall shook their heads, their expressions dark. Just like before, when we caught them, they died on the spot. We still haven't figured out the cause of their deaths, but one of them managed to escape with heavy injuries. A few of our brothers are still out there covering for him. Damn it! Shui Honghong slammed the armrest of her chair. The black-robed men had suddenly appeared 5 years ago. During that time, they'd robbed the Skyspan merchant convoys at least 10 times. She'd mobilized all the resources at her disposal to investigate their existence, but hadn't found a single clue. This time, she'd personally led the black-robed men to steal the auction items without anyone noticing. Fortunately, they'd recovered all the items, but she still didn't know which faction they belonged to. These black-robed men. There's a fire. Put it out. At that moment, the servants' anxious, angry shouts rang out from the courtyard. Practically every single servant in the residence carried buckets of water as they scurried back and forth between the front hall and the rear courtyard. Quite a few of the merchant convoy's attendants were among them. Xue Honghong pushed aside her questions about the black-robed men, rose to her feet and walked out the door. The instant she stepped out, she saw the rear courtyard blaze high into the sky. The flames spread ferociously, threatening to engulf all the guest rooms in the rear courtyard. How could there be a fire? Unbeknownst to her, just as everyone else was wondering why there was a fire or trying to help put it out, Xue Honghong gnashed her teeth so hard that they creaked. Her slender frame trembled with rage. Others might not know, but she did. Chapter 1055. Minor success in the Tao of Fire. After Yi Zichen pushed the flames away, they didn't disappear. Instead, they burned even more fiercely. The flames seemed to want to swallow him whole. Waves of heat washed over him, causing him to sweat profusely. In his dreams, he ran madly until, sniff, Yi Zichen's nose twitched. As he sprinted through his dreams, he seemed to smell the scent of roast meat. Naturally, a plate of steaming roast chicken appeared in his dreams. His mouth watered uncontrollably. Even though the flames were right in front of him, he had to snatch the roast chicken from the flames. That damned bastard! Xue Honghong rushed to the woodshed and looked at the raging flames. Her heart burned with fury, and she gnashed her teeth so hard that they creaked. Some of her attendants had already taken to the skies and started raining rain. However, these weren't ordinary flames, they were magical flames. Ordinary rain wouldn't affect them in the slightest. "Fetch the Sea of Innocence!" shouted Xue Honghong from outside. She scanned her surroundings a few times, but discovered that the fellow she'd locked up in the woodshed wasn't outside. "Control the flames. Don't let them spread. I'm going in to take a look." "First, miss." Xue Honghong ignored her attendants and servants. She silently muttered an incantation, and a fiery red light ignited around her. She kicked the woodshed's wooden door, smashed it to pieces, and barged in. The fire in the woodshed burned far more intensely than outside. Even Xue Honghong found it hard to endure the waves of heat that assaulted her senses. She felt as if all the water and essence in her body were about to evaporate into nothingness. "Hey, are you still there?" The thick black smoke made it impossible for her to open her eyes. All she could do was frantically circulate her spiritual energy to separate herself from the flames. However, the flames were simply too hot. All she could do was carefully move around in places where the flames hadn't yet reached. "Chicken drumstick, my chicken drumstick." A delirious murmur rang out from within the blazing firewood shed. Clearly, it was about to recede in the heat of the flames. When Xue Honghong heard this, she steeled her heart and dove into the sea of flames. "Chicken drumstick." Yi Zichen lay on the straw mat, drooling. To Xue Honghong's astonishment, even though the flames had swallowed up the entire woodshed, Yi Zichen wasn't affected in the slightest. Even the straw mat he was lying on was completely undamaged. When Xue Honghong saw that Yi Zichen hadn't been injured, she instinctively sighed in relief. Of course, it wasn't that she was worried about Yi Zichen's safety. It was purely because he'd locked her up in the woodshed, and she didn't want to see him die there. If he was somewhere else, he wouldn't care if he died or not. When she saw Yi Zichen's strange behavior in the woodshed, Xue Honghong was certain that the fire had something to do with him. Otherwise, why would he be completely fine? This guy was a scourge. Xue Honghong gnashed her teeth and cursed, then looked at Yi Zichen, who was still asleep and drooling. She directly kicked him. "Still sleeping. Chicken. Chicken." The kick woke Yi Zichen up with a start. He yelled and scrambled to his feet. When he saw the raging flames in the woodshed, he calmly sat back down, a hint of pleasant surprise in his eyes. "I've achieved initial success in the Tao of the Five Elements. I never would have guessed I'd break through in my sleep. I really am a genius. I've converted my immortal spiritual power to divine spiritual power by more than 30%. Once I reach initial success in the Tao of the 5 elements, my divine spiritual power should be complete as well. Just as he was feeling smug about himself, he sensed a bone-piercing cold in the middle of the flames. Through the raging flames, he saw Shui Honghong standing there, eyeing him coldly. Fire! In an instant, Yi Zichen's previously smug expression was filled with panic. He curled up like a frightened rabbit, gulped, and looked at the flames around him. He'd started the fire. There was no way he could escape. Was he supposed to pat himself on the chest and say, "I started the fire, so I'll bear all the damage"? That's impossible. Not to mention anything else, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to make up for the loss even if he sold himself. Just now, he'd secretly used his immortal awareness to take a look. It wasn't just the woodshed that was on fire. Practically the entire backyard was on fire. He absolutely couldn't take the blame for this. If he did, he'd die here for the rest of his life. Honey, even if you wanted to kill me, you didn't have to set me on fire, did you? Hey, wait. You're here too. Could it be that your family doesn't want us to be together? Do you want to die with me? I don't want to. I haven't lived long enough. I haven't seen the God Realm's great rivers and mountains. I still have too many unfulfilled wishes. I can't die here. It could be said that Yi Zichen had perfectly displayed the despair and unwillingness of someone on the verge of death. If Shui Honghong didn't know who he really was, she really might have been fooled by his acting. Don't play the fool here. Hurry up and tell me how to put out the fire. The flames are too fierce. Even though I've already sent everyone to fetch water from the Sea of Innocence, it'll be very difficult to put them out. How could I possibly know? You're not suspecting me, are you? She wanted him to take the blame? No way. Yi Zichen was determined to play dumb until the very end. In any case, there was no lie detector, nor were there any criminal psychologists to interrogate him. As long as he didn't admit it, who could say he was the culprit? After all, he was a victim of the flames. You. Shui Honghong was furious. Although she was in the woodshed, her immortal awareness kept an eye on the situation outside. The flames spread with the wind, and the entire residence was now engulfed in a sea of flames. The servants and attendants had brought water from the Sea of Innocence, but it didn't have much effect on the flames. Come with me. It was hard to imagine what kind of internal struggle Shui Honghong had gone through. In the end, she'd still decided to save Yi Zichen. Even Yi Zichen, who was standing on the straw mat, was stunned by this choice. He looked at Shui Honghong, who disregarded the fact that he was her benefactor, attacked him, and locked him in the woodshed. Yi Zichen's expression was one of stubbornness. Yi Zichen's resistance to her softened somewhat. Chapter 1056. Instructor Yi teaches you how to pick up a girl. What's going on? What are the servants doing here? How did they start a fire like this? The towering flames startled Elder Che. He grabbed one of the attendants who'd been carrying buckets of water to put out the fire. I don't know how the fire started either, but the first miss said it's no ordinary fire. It's the Tao of the 5 elements flames, so she told us to bring some water to put it out. However, the fire's too strong. The water we've brought isn't even enough to put out the fire. The attendant carrying the buckets looked distressed. Water couldn't be stored in spatial artifacts, so they could only bring buckets by buckets from the Sea of Innocence's river. Even though they were human immortals and could fly, the river was too far away. Even if they didn't dare slack off in the slightest, they couldn't put out the fire as quickly as it spread. Needless to say, the servants weren't even at the spiritual body level. If they wanted to fetch water, they had to run around on foot. They were practically negligible. Hovering in the air, Elder Che furrowed his brows. These flames were undoubtedly magical fire. However, the only fire attribute cultivator in their group was the First Mississippi. She still had the Master's precious treasures, so there was no way she'd cause such a ruckus. So who was it? How dare they set fire to the Skyspan Trading Company? Where is the first miss? The attendant with the buckets licked his lips, a hint of worry in his eyes. She went into the woodshed. What? Elder Che's expression darkened. He waved his sleeves and shouted, Nonsense! Nonsense! How could you let the first miss fall into such danger? Wait, that's just an ordinary woodshed. Why would she go there? She didn't listen to us at all. It seems she's still locked up in the woodshed. She went in to save the man we captured on the ancient path, replied the attendant. In an instant, Elder Che's expression turned extremely ugly. Her love affair had reached this point? The clan had chosen so many geniuses for her, but she'd never taken a liking to any of them. He never would have guessed she'd become so enamored with the Lower Lands disciple. He hadn't seen anything special about that youth either. Why would the first miss take a liking to him? Although he felt indignant towards Xue Honghong, she was still the clan's pearl. Her status was exalted, and he couldn't allow anything to happen to her. Tell the firefighters to get out of the way. I'll use the Sea of Innocence to put out the fire. As soon as those words were spoken, Elder Che raised his hands. An azure light flickered in his palm, and the moment this light appeared, the moisture in the air began to gather around him. Several kilometers away, the Sea of Innocence's waterway trembled, and a water dragon soared into the air with a rumble. The water dragon was like the source of the river. It brought with it the entire river's worth of Innocence's seawater. With a roar, it flew to the backyard of the mansion and turned into a great storm that poured down. If he wanted to move a woman, simply talking wouldn't have much of an effect. Yi Zichen held Xue Honghong's hands tightly. His gaze shifted, and he saw that one of the beams above Xue Honghong's head had been charred black. The material is so good that the house didn't collapse. Yi Zichen muttered to himself. He hesitated for a moment, then, while Xue Honghong wasn't paying attention, flicked his finger at the charred beam. He did it on purpose. The charred beam couldn't bear the weight of the house and collapsed. Be careful. Seeing that the woodshed was on the verge of collapse, Yi Zichen retreated so Xue Honghong wouldn't notice. Yi Zichen pulled her into his arms, then used his back to block the burning wooden plank. Then he hurriedly reversed the flow of his blood. He coughed up a mouthful of blood, which landed directly on Xue Honghong's face. Get to the point. The blood he spat on Xue Honghong's face was the key. He couldn't spit it onto the ground, nor could he not. Only when it sprayed on her face would she have the most intuitive feeling. You got hurt because of her. But that wasn't all. He needed to say some loving words to shatter her last line of defense. Trust me. He hugged Xue Honghong tightly. His voice was weak, and blood dripped from the corners of his mouth. If I'm still alive, I'll definitely go to your clan and ask for your hand in marriage. I'll officially marry you. Even Xue Honghong was a bit dazed by this scene. He'd sworn such a sincere oath under these circumstances? Suddenly, under the illumination of this sea of fire, this guy that she hated the most actually made her feel a bit taller. It seems like it worked. Once we get out of here, he shouldn't bother me anymore, right? Yi Zichen noticed Xue Honghong's slightly dazed expression, but he didn't dare relax in the slightest. He maintained his sincere, yet weak appearance. Go. You have to survive. Hey, get to the point. Why did he have to push Xue Honghong away now? Yi Zichen had long since seen through Elder Che's actions. Right now, he had to portray himself as someone who'd given up all hope of survival, someone who didn't care about his own life and death. This was all part of his plan. As expected, when Yi Zichen pushed Xue Honghong away, her last line of defense crumbled. She stared blankly at Yi Zichen, who'd just pushed her away. Her emotions were indescribably complex. Although the flames threatened him, they couldn't truly harm him. Even if the firewood fell, she'd been able to dodge in advance. Yi Zichen's actions seemed superfluous, but to her, she was deeply moved. Xue Honghong couldn't help but recall their earlier bickering. Back then, she'd only thought of him as someone with no ability to talk back. But after this scene, could it be that this was the real him? Whoosh! Just as Xue Honghong's emotions were incomparably complex, rain poured down from above. The raindrops fell on the flames, and not long after, the raging flames were completely extinguished. Almost instinctively, Xue Honghong ran to Yi Zichen's side when she saw the flames extinguish. "We don't have to die. Your injuries, are they all right?" She was still young and immature. It was obvious that she was a naive little flower with little emotional experience. Just look at her. She was already worried about her injuries. Everything was under control. Since things had come this far, Yi Zichen naturally couldn't let all his previous efforts go to waste. "Ha! That's great. I survived. My injuries are fine. They're just minor injuries. Don't worry. Once we get out, I'll definitely pay a visit to your family and propose marriage. I'll officially marry you." Crooked neck. He fell into Xue Honghong's arms. Perfect. The instant Yi Zichen lost consciousness, Xue Honghong screamed, her face covered in soot. Chapter 1057. Chapter 1057. Bloodline awakening. Yi Zichen collapsed into Xue Honghong's arms. He couldn't help but feel bitter inside. From start to finish, everything had gone well. It was just that lecture at the end that made him feel terrible. He couldn't blame her. After all, the two of them hadn't even exchanged names. On the whole, it was perfect. When the roof collapsed, Elder Che and his subordinates' hearts pounded. That was especially true of the scream from inside the woodshed. They were terrified that something would happen to Xue Honghong in the sea of flames. As the flames subsided, some of the people outside ran in. First Mississippi, Xue Honghong's crimson clothes glowed with light. She was obviously wearing an extraordinary protective artifact. As the sea of flames burned, her face was covered in soot. She held Yi Zichen, who was pretending to be dead, tightly in her arms. Step by step, she made her way outside. Out of the way. Xue Honghong's expression was grave. Her subordinates didn't dare disobey. They hurriedly made way. When they saw Yi Zichen in her arms, the attendants' expressions grew strange. "First Miss, what are you doing?" When he saw this, Elder Che knit his brows and roared in anger. Xue Honghong was an unmarried young lady, yet she was holding a man in her arms. What was going on? "Out of the way." She spoke in that same unquestionable tone. Elder Che was just about to say something, but suddenly felt an oppressive pressure that made it hard for him to breathe. Suddenly, he looked at the space between Xue Honghong's brows and saw a golden flame slowly burning in the center of her brows. Bloodline awakening. This was the unique power of Xue Honghong's family's bloodline. It was a special ability possessed by all peak bloodlines of the god race. The earlier one awakened their bloodline, the greater their talent. Mortal, profound, earth, sky, king. Normally, their clan's bloodline awakened before the age of 16. For example, Xue Beibei had awakened her bloodline when she was 9. A heaven-grade bloodline. Her talent was so shocking that even the clan's elders fought over her to accept her as a disciple. Xue Honghong was an anomaly. Ever since she was a child, she'd displayed cultivation talent that far surpassed her peers. Quite a few of the clan's elders were certain that she'd be the first to awaken her bloodline, and that she'd have a heaven-grade bloodline at the very least. To everyone's surprise, even after her 16th birthday, her bloodline hadn't awakened. Gradually, the people in the clan lost interest in her. No matter how amazing she was in the past, if she did not awaken her bloodline, her future achievements would be limited. She'd left the Divine Mountains and gone to the 72 districts, and taken over the clan's Skyspan trading company. This kind of decision was actually not much different from being abandoned by the clan. However, what was even more surprising was that even though she had not awakened her bloodline, her cultivation speed was getting faster and faster. He had become a celestial immortal at the age of 19. He was considered one of the 100 people who had become a celestial immortal before the age of 20, and all of them had awakened their bloodline before the age of 12, and their bloodline was above the earth rank. Xue Honghong was now 24 years old and a mid-stage sky immortal. Even though it seemed slow to advance to the mid-stage heavenly immortal stage in 5 years, one must know that an ordinary person might not even be able to take a step forward in 10 years. More importantly, she had awakened her bloodline at the age of 24. Elder Che, who was standing in front of Xue Honghong, was so shocked that he was speechless. Her bloodline awakening at the age of 24 meant that she had broken the norm that had been passed down for millions of years. Furthermore, the flame on her forehead was golden. Common grade was white, mystic grade was red, earth grade was blue, and heaven grade was purple. A legendary king grade bloodline. A legendary king grade bloodline? If it really was a king grade bloodline, then he couldn't control her as an outer managing elder. Not to mention him, even the elders in the clan would not dare to say a word of no to her. Out of the way! Another deep rebuke rang out. This time, Elder Che didn't dare tarry. He hurriedly stepped aside and bowed deeply to Xue Honghong. "First miss, please." She indifferently walked over to the spot that Elder Che had opened up for her, but she stopped after taking a few steps. She indifferently glanced at Elder Che, who was still bowing deeply, as golden flames burned in her eyes. "Have the clan send the best doctors and the best life-prolonging pills to see me." "Yes." When he saw the golden flames, Elder Che's heart trembled. He bowed respectfully, and Xue Honghong floated away, not bothering to look at him. Only when Xue Honghong was out of sight did Elder Che straighten up. By now, his forehead was drenched in sweat. The pressure was simply too strong. Even though she was a great circle heavenly immortal, she still felt extremely strained under this pressure. This was the pressure of a king-grade bloodline. "You." Suppressing his shock, Elder Che frowned at his subordinates and shouted, "I'll be returning to the clan in a moment. I will return to the clan in a while. From now on, you must ensure the safety of the first miss and the third Mississippi. Even if you die, you must not let the first miss get hurt, not even a drop of blood or a strand of hair. Do you understand?" Even if his subordinates didn't know what had happened, they all sensed the gravity of the situation. "Yes, sir." Elder Che glanced at his subordinates, then spared no expense of his lifespan. He left several seals in the courtyard, then took out a jade pendant, crushed it, and vanished from the world. Creak. Yi Zichen was still lying in Xue Honghong's arms, playing dead. When he heard the sound of a door, he felt himself land on a soft bed. He stealthily inhaled a few breaths of the air around him. The entire room was filled with a faint fragrance. This arousing fragrance was no different from Xue Honghong's. "I'm actually lying in that woman's bed?" Yi Zichen was astonished, but he didn't dare let it show. He was currently playing dead, so he absolutely couldn't let the cat out of the bag. However, just now, he seemed to have heard Xue Honghong send for the best doctor and the best pills. Pills were no problem. Eating them would definitely be harmless. But if the doctor came, wouldn't the cat be out of the bag? He had to find an opportunity to come back from the dead. He'd gone to great lengths to put on this show. If a doctor ruined it, he'd lose more than he'd gained. What he couldn't understand was this. Even if that woman really wanted to save him, there was no need to go this far, was there? She'd even brought him to her bedroom. Could it be that she'd truly fallen in love with him? Or perhaps it was just as he'd said. The moment they'd first met, she'd already secretly fallen for him. She wanted to use this opportunity to… How could he allow her to ruin his reputation like that? But then he thought about it. He was currently playing dead. If he resisted, he'd be exposed. Forget it. If he really couldn't do it, he'd just give in to her. He was a man, after all. A true hero was someone who could bow and submit when necessary. However, he hadn't expected Xue Honghong's voice to come at this moment. Chapter 1058. A 10-year promise. Yi Zichen's heart trembled, but his expression didn't betray it. He continued to play dead. Xue Honghong stood by the window and looked at Yi Zichen, who still hadn't reacted. She couldn't help but sigh, then inexplicably smiled at him. When she looked back and smiled, 100 beauties bloomed. She was probably talking about her. Her smile was both charming and seductive, as if shrouded in mist and water. The corners of her exquisite lips curled up slightly, and her red lips parted slightly, inviting a kiss. This was a woman who radiated seductiveness from the very core of her being. Her every frown tugged at men's nerves. However, this kind of seductive beauty usually kept a straight face and used her most domineering methods to maintain the Skyspan Trading Company's business. It was only when she was alone that she would smile at herself in the mirror and praise how beautiful she was. "You're really special, so special that I really want to get to know you." Xue Honghong didn't care at all that Yi Zichen was lying on the bed, pretending to be asleep. Perhaps it was more accurate to say that she didn't know if he was really unconscious or just pretending to be asleep. She simply looked at him and muttered to herself, "I've never had a particularly happy life. When I was young, I didn't know any better. I always wanted to show off in front of my elders. Back then, I just wanted their praise, but now that I'm older, I realize it's become a burden. I don't like being restricted. Every day they urge me to do this and that. I'm really annoyed. In order to make them give up on me, I deliberately didn't awaken my bloodline power. I wanted them to be disappointed in me. That way I could relax." Sure enough, it was just as I thought. When I came of age and hadn't awakened my bloodline yet, the clansmen stopped paying attention to me. The elders stopped pushing me, so I took advantage of the opportunity to get my father to let me run the Skyspan Trading Company. That's why I ran away from the Divine Mountains. The past few years in the 72 districts have been the most comfortable I've ever been. No one's restricting me, and I'm the boss. If nothing unexpected happens, I'd like to live like this for the rest of my life, but what's going on? Yi Zichen lay in bed and listened carefully. Suddenly, he felt like he'd gone a little too far. Forget it. If he really had gone too far, he'd just listen to her. After all, he was a man. As a man, he had to shoulder his responsibilities. However, from what this woman said, this family seemed to be quite powerful. And that turning point just now, could it be that she was going to mention him? But we ran into each other. There was no surprise at all. It was just as Yi Zichen thought. The turning point Xue Honghong spoke of really was him. She turned around, her eyes as clear as blue waves, brimming with this faint warmth. Her eyes narrowed into a perfect crescent moon. Perhaps this was the smile of an angel. It chased away all the haze, causing the stars to lose their splendor. Our meeting was really an accident. I also know that what you said was actually a joke, or perhaps it was to provoke me. I know all of this, but in the woodshed just now I might have taken it seriously. Gulp. Yi Zichen, who was playing dead, could no longer keep up the act. He subconsciously gulped. He truly did realize that he'd gone too far. Xue Honghong happened to see this, but she didn't expose him. Instead, she continued to smile. "When I saw you faint, I was truly worried. I felt fear and unease from the bottom of my heart. I was afraid you'd die trying to save me. If that happened, I'd feel guilty for the rest of my life, and I might never be able to fall in love with anyone else. I had to save you. Not just to save you, but to save myself as well. I think Elder Che revealed the power of my bloodline, a royal bloodline. He wouldn't dare disobey any of my decisions. I asked him to find the best doctor in the clan and get the best pills to save your life. The news of my bloodline awakening will also reach the clan. It won't be long before someone from the clan comes to find me and evaluate the power of my bloodline. In truth, you don't need to worry. Or perhaps I should say that your worries are useless. I won't rely on you. My dignity and my clan won't allow me to do that. You should be a celestial immortal. Perhaps for you, your current achievements are quite good. But to my clan, you're still far too lacking. Even if I took everything you said seriously, even if it's just as you said, and I've secretly fallen in love with you, we can't be together. We're not even from the same world." As she said this, Xue Honghong's expression grew bitter. In the past 20 years, this was the first time she'd felt the slightest bit of love. Sadly, the man she'd fallen for couldn't possibly be a good match for her. Especially considering her bloodline, there was no way her clan would allow her to be with a sky immortal. It wasn't just her clan, even she wouldn't make such a choice. With a royal bloodline, she was bound to become one of the top leaders of the god race. She would stand at the very peak of the world. Yi Zichen was a sky immortal now, but the gap between them would soon grow, and their horizons would gradually change. She couldn't tolerate the fact that her man was weaker than her. "You're underestimating me." Yi Zichen, who'd been slamming his head against the wall for so long, couldn't keep up the act. He suddenly sat up straight, only to discover that Xue Honghong was right in front of him. Their noses were pressed together, so close they could feel each other's breath. Xue Honghong didn't dodge, but Yi Zichen stepped aside. When she saw Yi Zichen step aside, Xue Honghong felt a bit disappointed, but also inwardly rejoiced. If Yi Zichen really wanted to do something to her, she wasn't sure if she'd resist. If she really didn't, she feared she'd regret it for the rest of her life. But if he didn't even have that much courage, how could he even talk about marrying her? How difficult would it be to gain her family's approval? "You're awake." Xue Honghong set aside her disappointment and smiled calmly. Yi Zichen laughed dryly, somewhat embarrassed. "I admit I was pretending to be asleep, but you're going a bit too far, aren't you? I can tell from your words that you despise me. I'm just stating the facts. Of course, you can interpret it that way. You." He hadn't expected her to be so direct, even when it came to hurting someone. Yi Zichen took a few deep breaths, then nodded. "All right, you're the daughter of a rich family. It's normal for you to despise a commoner like me. However, I hate it when people look down on me the most." "So what? Did you just say you were interested in me?" "Yes." Xue Honghong didn't deny it. "That's for the best." Instantly, Yi Zichen's expression grew solemn as well. "I don't care what your family background is like. I'm marrying you." "All right." Xue Honghong's expression was as calm as ever. She laughed. "But I can't wait for you forever. My family won't allow it. 10 years. I can only give you 10 years. During that time, no matter what marriage partner my family arranges for me, I'll flatly refuse. But if you don't marry me after 10 years, don't blame me. I'll hate you for the rest of my life. I'll hate you for the rest of my life." All of a sudden, Yi Zichen thought of Su Yan, and his aura weakened somewhat. When Xue Honghong saw this, she assumed he was afraid. She was a bit disappointed, but then she heard him speak. I have other women. That's fine. So long as you keep your promise, I don't care." Xue Honghong's father had over a dozen wives. She'd never had any qualms about this since she was young. Experts naturally had such privileges.